The train lurched to a stop, and Clara's stomach lurched with it. Through the smudged window, Montana spread out like a promise that had already been broken. The sky was too big. The mountains looked like they wanted to crush everything beneath them. Dust devils spun across the depot platform, and the few people waiting there had faces like shuttered windows, closed, suspicious, unwelcoming. Clara pressed her palm against the glass. It was cold. Everything here would be cold, she thought. Cold and hard and nothing like the advertisements had promised. Seeking honest woman of good character for marriage. Simple farming life. Modest means, must be willing to work. No frills, no nonsense. If you're strong enough for the frontier, write to Ethan Hale, Silver Ridge, Montana Territory. Simple. Modest. The words had felt like a lifeline when she'd read them in that Boston boarding house, her last dollar spent on a newspaper, her landlady's threat still ringing in her ears. She'd written back that same night, her handwriting shaky from hunger. She'd lied about almost everything, said she could cook, said she could sew, said she came from a good family, fallen on hard times rather than no family at all. 3 weeks later, the reply came. Formal, brief. A train ticket fell out of the envelope. Your acceptance is noted. Arrive November 14th. Arrangements have been made. No poetry, no sweet words. But Clara hadn't been looking for romance. She'd been looking for survival, and survival didn't come with declarations of affection. The conductor appeared at her shoulder, his face craggy and weathered. Silver Ridge, miss. This is your stop. Clara stood, smoothing her dress. It was the only decent one she owned. Dark green wool, mended so many times the seams were more thread than fabric. Her trunk contained even less. 2 other dresses, both worse, undergarments with holes, a hairbrush missing half its bristles, and a small cameo that had belonged to her mother. That was it. 22 years of life reduced to one battered trunk and a desperate gamble. She stepped onto the platform, and the wind hit her like a fist. It carried the smell of horses and wood smoke and something else, something mineral and ancient, like the earth itself was bleeding. Mrs. Hale! Clara turned. The woman who'd spoken stood near a gleaming black carriage that looked wildly out of place against the rough-hewn depot. She was perhaps 60, dressed in a traveling suit that probably cost more than Clara had earned in her entire life. Her face was handsome in a severe way, all sharp angles and assessing eyes. I'm Clara Whitlock, Clara said. Not Mrs. Hale yet. The wedding hasn't... A technicality. The woman's smile was thin as paper. I'm Constance Hale, Ethan's mother. Welcome to Montana. The way she said welcome made it sound like a threat. Constance's gaze traveled over Clara with surgical precision, cataloging every mend, every stain, every sign of poverty. Clara forced herself to stand straight, to meet those cold eyes. She'd survived Boston's worst tenements, worked in factories that chewed up girls and spit out corpses. She wouldn't be cowed by one rich woman's disapproval. The carriage is waiting, Constance said, turning away. We have quite a distance to travel. A man in livery, actual livery, like something from a storybook, loaded Clara's pathetic trunk. She climbed into the carriage, sinking into upholstery softer than any bed she'd ever slept in. Constance settled across from her, arranging her skirts with practiced precision. The carriage rolled forward, and Clara watched Silver Ridge pass by the window. It was larger than she'd expected. A real town, not just a collection of shacks. She saw a bank, a hotel, a mercantile with glass windows, a church with a white steeple. People moved along the boardwalks, but as the carriage passed, they stopped. Stared. They're looking at us, Clara said. They're looking at you. Constance's voice was flat. You're a curiosity. We don't often have visitors. The pause before visitors felt deliberate, weighted. Clara turned from the window. The advertisement said Ethan was a farmer. Did it? It said modest means. How interesting. Constance smiled that paper-thin smile again. Tell me, Miss Whitlock, what made you answer an advertisement from a complete stranger? Desperation? The bluntness should have shocked her. It didn't. Clara had learned young that rich people said whatever they wanted because they could afford the consequences. Yes, Clara said. Desperation. I assume that's what you were counting on. Something flickered in Constance's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or a grudging respect. At least you're honest about it. That's more than the last one. Claire's breath caught. The last one? But Constance had already looked away, her gaze fixed on something outside the window. The silence that followed felt intentional, like a door being firmly shut. The carriage turned off the main road onto a private drive lined with cottonwood trees. They drove for what felt like miles. The landscape changed, became manicured, controlled. Fences appeared pristine and white. In the distance, Claire could see cattle, hundreds of them, spreading across pastures that seemed to go on forever. This wasn't a farm. This was an empire. Then the house came into view, and Claire's heart stopped. It was a mansion. 3 stories of dark stone and carved wood, with towers and balconies and windows that caught the late afternoon sun like eyes. It looked like something transplanted from a European countryside, dropped into the Montana wilderness by some capricious god who wanted to prove a point about conquest. "There's been a mistake," Clara whispered. "No mistake," Constance said. "Welcome to Blackwood Estate, Miss Whitlock. Your new home." The carriage stopped before a massive front door. The liveried man opened the carriage, offering his hand. Clara took it, her legs unsteady as she stepped down onto a gravel drive that was probably raked smooth every morning. The door opened before they reached it. Ethan Hale stood in the doorway, and Clara's first thought was that he looked tired. He was handsome in an unremarkable way. Brown hair, regular features, medium build, but there were shadows under his eyes, and his smile, when it came, seemed to take effort. "Miss Whitlock." He descended the steps, his hand extended. "I hope the journey wasn't too difficult." His handshake was brief, his palm slightly damp. Nervous, Clara realized. He was nervous. "It was fine," Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Though I'm confused. Your advertisement said, 'I know what it said.'" Ethan glanced at his mother, something unreadable passing between them. "Perhaps we could discuss it inside. You must be exhausted." "I'm not exhausted. I'm owed an explanation." Constance made a small sound. Amusement or irritation, Clara couldn't tell. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're right," he said. "You are. But could we at least get out of the cold first?" Clara wanted to refuse, wanted to demand answers right there on the gravel drive, but the wind was picking up and she hadn't eaten since morning. Fine. The interior of the house was even more overwhelming than the exterior. A chandelier hung in the entrance hall, crystal dripping like frozen tears. The floor was polished marble that reflected their faces back at them, distorted and strange. Oil paintings lined the walls, landscapes and portraits, all in heavy gilt frames. A portrait directly ahead caught Clara's attention. A man in his 50s, hard-faced and stern, wearing clothes from perhaps 20 years ago. There was something cruel about his mouth. "My father," Ethan said, following her gaze. "He built this house." "On what?" Clara asked. "The advertisement said farming." "We do farm, among other things." Ethan's discomfort was palpable now. "Miss Whitlock, Clara, I apologize for the deception. The advertisement was simplified. I thought if I'd been honest about the circumstances, about what I could offer, it would attract the wrong kind of attention. Women seeking money rather than what? A partnership?" Clara laughed, the sound sharp in the cavernous hall. "You lied to make sure you got someone desperate enough not to have options, someone who'd be grateful for anything. That's not, it's exactly that." Clara's anger was rising now, hot and clean. "You wanted someone powerless, someone who couldn't say no." "If you'll allow me to explain, Mrs. Hale?" A new voice, young and female, echoed from the staircase. "Is she here? Did she actually come?" A girl appeared on the landing above them, perhaps 15 or 16, with Ethan's brown hair and Constance's sharp features. She wore a blue dress that probably cost more than Clara's entire wardrobe, but her face was eager, almost desperately hopeful. "Lily," Constance said, her voice sharp, "go to your room." "But I want to meet her. Now." The girl's face fell. She looked at Clara with something that might have been pleading, then turned and disappeared back up the stairs. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the house. "My sister," Ethan said unnecessarily. "She's enthusiastic." "She seems frightened," Clara said. You're imagining things. I don't think I am. Constance moved toward a doorway to the left. Mrs. Baker has prepared a room for you, Miss Whitlock. You'll want to freshen up before dinner. We keep civilized hours here, despite what you might think of the frontier. Dinner is at 7. Don't be late. She vanished through the doorway before Clara could respond. Ethan rubbed his face, looking even more exhausted than before. I really am sorry about the deception. I can explain everything if you'll give me a chance. Tomorrow, perhaps, after you've rested. Where is she? Ethan's hand fell away from his face. What? The last one. Your mother mentioned her. Where is she? The silence that followed was so complete Clara could hear her own heartbeat. I don't know what you mean, Ethan said finally. Your mother said I was more honest than the last one. Who was she talking about? A misunderstanding. Mother sometimes... Don't... Clara's voice was steel. I've been lied to enough today. Was there another woman? Another bride? Ethan's face had gone pale. There was a woman, yes, but she left. Decided this life wasn't for her. Took the train back east. When? 3 years ago. What was her name? I don't see how that's relevant. What was her name? Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Sarah Brennan. She was here for 2 weeks, decided it wasn't suitable, and left. That's all there is to it. He was lying. Clara didn't know how she knew, but she was certain of it. Something about the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers, the way his voice had gone flat and rehearsed. Miss Whitlock? A new woman appeared, older, gray-haired, wearing a housekeeper's practical dress. I'm Mrs. Baker. I'll show you to your room. Clara wanted to press further, but exhaustion was finally catching up with her. The train journey, the shock of the mansion, the confrontation. It was all crashing down at once. Fine, she said. Lead the way, Mrs. Baker led her up the grand staircase, down a hallway lined with more portraits and closed doors. The house was too quiet. Clara could hear their footsteps, the rustle of fabric, nothing else. Where were the servants that a house this size would require? Where was the noise of life? Here we are. Mrs. Baker opened a door near the end of the hall. The room was larger than any Clara had lived in. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in emerald velvet. A wardrobe stood against one wall, a writing desk against another. A fireplace was already lit, casting dancing shadows across walls papered in subtle florals. Your trunk will be brought up shortly, Mrs. Baker said. There's a wash basin and pitcher there, and fresh towels. If you need anything, pull that cord. It rings in the kitchen. Thank you. Mrs. Baker hesitated at the door. Miss Whitlock? A word of advice, if you'll take it from an old woman who's been in this house too long. Clara turned. Yes? Be careful what questions you ask. Some doors once opened can't be closed again. Before Clara could respond, she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. Clara stood in the middle of the luxurious room, her hands shaking. She'd come here expecting hardship, expecting to work her fingers to the bone for a roof and meals. Instead, she'd found wealth that made no sense, a family that radiated tension like heat from a stove, and a mystery that everyone seemed determined to bury. She walked to the window. It overlooked the back of the estate. More gardens, more fences, more evidence of money that shouldn't exist. In the distance, she could see a structure that looked like a small chapel or mausoleum, dark stone against the darkening sky. A knock at the door made her jump. Come in. The door opened a crack and Lily Hale slipped through, closing it quickly behind her. Up close, Clara could see the girl was prettier than she'd first appeared, but there was something haunted in her eyes. I'm not supposed to be here, Lily said, her voice low. Mother would be furious if she knew I'd come. Then why did you? Lily moved closer, glancing at the door as if expecting it to burst open. Because I have to warn you. Because maybe if I warn you, you'll be different. You'll be smarter. Warn me about what? This house, this family. Lily's hands twisted in her skirts. You should leave, tonight, if you can. Take the first train back to wherever you came from. Forget you ever answered that advertisement. Clara's heart was pounding now. Why? What's wrong with this house? Everything. Lily's eyes were bright with tears. Everything is wrong here. The money isn't clean. Father did terrible things to get it, and now we're all trapped by what he built. Ethan thinks he can make it right, thinks he can fix things by being different, but he can't. The house won't let him. The family won't let him. Lily, you're not making sense. Sarah understood. She figured it out faster than anyone expected, and she tried to leave, but she waited too long. She waited until she'd seen too much, knew too much. And then the door flew open. Constance stood there, her face a mask of fury. Lily, your room, now. Mother, I was just... now. Lily cast one last desperate look at Clara, then fled. Constance watched her go, then turned that cold gaze on Clara. My daughter is prone to dramatics, Miss Whitlock. She reads too many novels, fills her head with gothic nonsense. I'd advise you not to encourage her fantasies. She seemed genuinely frightened. She's a child with an overactive imagination. Nothing more. Constance's smile was like a knife. Dinner is in an hour. I trust you'll join us. We have much to discuss regarding your future here. She left, pulling the door closed with careful precision. Clara sank onto the bed, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed at her to do exactly what Lily had suggested. Pack her pathetic trunk and run. But run to what? She had no money for a return ticket, no job waiting in Boston, no family, no friends, no safety net at all. She'd gambled everything on this, and now she was trapped. Her trunk arrived, carried by a silent servant who wouldn't meet her eyes. Clara unpacked mechanically, hanging her shabby dresses in the massive wardrobe where they looked even more pitiful against the fine wood. She washed her face, repinned her hair, tried to calm her breathing. When she looked in the mirror above the wash basin, she barely recognized herself. She looked small in this grand room, insignificant, like a mouse in a cathedral. But she'd survived worse than rich people's secrets. She'd survived factories where girls lost fingers to machinery and landlords who traded rent for favors. She'd survived hunger and cold and the kind of loneliness that ate you from the inside out. She could survive this too. Clara changed into her least mended dress and made her way back downstairs. She could hear voices coming from somewhere to the right and followed them to a dining room that could have seated 30 people. Instead, only 4 places were set, clustered at one end of a table that stretched into shadow. Ethan stood when she entered, as did an older man she hadn't seen before. He was perhaps 50, well-dressed, with iron-gray hair and the kind of face that revealed nothing. Miss Whitlock, Ethan said, this is Marcus Bennett, our family attorney. He handles all our business affairs. Bennett's handshake was firm, professional. A pleasure to meet you, Miss Whitlock. I've heard a great deal about you. From whom? We only just met. Bennett's smile didn't reach his eyes. From Ethan, naturally. He's been quite anxious about your arrival. They sat. Servants appeared, 2 of them, moving with practiced silence, bringing soup, bread, wine. Clara's stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since dawn, but she forced herself to eat slowly, to use the right spoon, to not betray just how desperately hungry she was. I've prepared the marriage contract, Bennett said, producing papers from a leather case. Quite standard, really. In the event of Ethan's death, you'll receive a widow's portion, enough to live comfortably, though, of course, the bulk of the estate remains with the family. There are also provisions regarding children, should any be born of the union. Clara's hand tightened on her spoon. You're very confident this marriage will happen. Aren't you? Constance asked. You came all this way. I came because I was promised a farm and an honest man. I'm sitting in a mansion with a family that lies as easily as breathing, so no, I'm not confident about anything. Ethan set down his wine glass. You're angry. You have every right to be. But please, let me explain. The advertisement was misleading, yes, but my intentions were genuine. I do want a wife, a partner, someone who chose this life for the right reasons. And what are the right reasons? Not money, not social climbing, just a genuine desire to build something honest and real, even in difficult circumstances. How noble, Clara said, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. Lying to find honesty, that makes perfect sense. Bennett cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the practical matters. The wedding is scheduled for 3 days from now. That gives you time to... 3 days? Clara's voice rose. I haven't even agreed to marry him. But surely nothing. Clara stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I need answers before I agree to anything. Real answers, not the rehearsed scripts you're all reciting, starting with Sarah Brennan. What really happened to her? The silence was absolute. Even the servants had gone still. Finally, Constance spoke. She left. That's all there is to it. You're lying. Careful, Miss Whitlock. You're a guest in this house. Am I? Because it feels more like I'm a prisoner. Clara looked at each of them in turn, Ethan's guilty face, Constance's cold fury, Bennett's practiced neutrality. Someone tell me the truth, or I'm leaving tonight. I'll walk to town if I have to. Ethan stood. You'll never make it. It's 6 miles and the temperature's dropping. You'd freeze before you got halfway. Then I'll die honest instead of living as a liar's wife. Clara, please. The truth, Ethan. Now. He looked at his mother. Some wordless communication passed between them. Then Ethan's shoulders sagged in defeat. Sarah came here 3 years ago, just like you. Answered the same advertisement. She stayed for 2 weeks and then she left in the middle of the night. Took one of the horses, rode toward town. We found the horse the next morning, wandering loose. We never found Sarah. Clara's blood went cold. You never found her? We searched, Ethan said quickly. For days. The sheriff organized search parties, but the wilderness here is vast, and if she went off the trail, got lost in the dark, people die out here, Clara. It's not uncommon. Did you report it to territorial authorities? Of course we did, Bennett interjected smoothly. There was an investigation. Everything was thoroughly examined. The conclusion was death by misadventure. She panicked, fled unwisely, and the frontier claimed her. Tragic, but hardly unprecedented. Why did she run? No one answered. Why? Clara repeated, her voice hard. Did she run in the middle of the night, so frightened that she'd rather risk dying in the wilderness than stay in this house 1 more hour? Lily's voice came from the doorway, small and clear. Because she found the ledgers. Everyone turned. Lily stood there in her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking younger and more fragile than before. Lily, go back to bed, Constance commanded. No. For the first time, Lily's voice carried something other than fear. Someone has to tell her the truth. Someone has to be honest for once. Lily. Father kept ledgers, records of everything, every deal, every acquisition, every piece of land the railroad helped him steal. Sarah found them in his study. She confronted him at dinner just like this, called him a thief and a murderer. He just smiled at her. That's when she knew she was in danger. That's when she ran. Clara felt the room tilting around her. The railroad? My father was a land agent for the Northern Pacific, Ethan said quietly. He helped secure right-of-way agreements with ranchers and homesteaders. Some of those agreements were not obtained ethically. Not obtained ethically, Clara repeated. That's a delicate way of saying he stole land. He used the law, Bennett said. Everything was legal, even if it wasn't always moral. And when the law wasn't enough? What then? The silence answered her question. Oh my God, Clara whispered. He killed people. We don't know that, Ethan said, but his voice was weak. There were incidents, violence, but Father always claimed. Father was a monster, Lily said, and Mother helped him. And now we're all living in a house built on bones. Constance moved so fast Clara didn't see it coming. The slap echoed through the dining room, sharp as a gunshot. Lily's head snapped to the side, a red mark blooming on her cheek. You will not speak of your father that way, Constance hissed. You will not betray this family with your melodramatic... Stop. Clara's voice cut through the room like a blade. Hit her again, and I'll make sure every newspaper from here to Boston knows exactly what kind of people you are. Constance turned, her eyes murderous. You don't have that power. Don't I? I'm a witness now. To everything you've just admitted, fraud, theft, possibly murder. And I'm not some frightened girl you can make disappear. I came from nothing. I've got nothing to lose. That makes me dangerous. Bennett stood smoothly, his lawyer's mask firmly in place. I think everyone needs to calm down. Miss Whitlock, you're understandably upset, but making accusations... I'm not making accusations. I'm stating facts. Your client built his fortune on stolen land and possibly blood. His son lured me here under false pretenses, and the last woman who figured that out vanished into the wilderness and was never seen again. Those are facts, Mr. Bennett. What are you going to do about them?" "What are you going to do about them?" Constance asked. "Run? You said it yourself. You have nothing, nowhere to go. You're trapped here just as much as we are." Clara looked at her, this elegant woman with blood on her hands and ice in her veins, and felt something shift inside her, a door opening, a decision being made. "No," Clara said. "I'm not trapped, because I'm not running. I'm staying." Ethan's head snapped up. "What?" "I'm staying. I'm going to marry you in 3 days, just like you planned. I'm going to become part of this family with all the rights and privileges that entails." "I don't understand," Ethan said. Clara smiled, and it felt like the first genuine expression she'd worn since arriving. "I know you don't, but you will." She turned to Bennett. "That contract you mentioned, I want to review it, tonight, and I want some amendments made." "What kind of amendments?" "The kind that protect me. The kind that give me access to family records, family accounts, family business. If I'm going to be a Hale, I'm going to be a real one, not some ornamental wife locked in a pretty room." "Absolutely not," Constance said. "You have no right." "I have every right. You brought me here. You dangled this marriage as salvation. Now you're stuck with me, unless you want me to walk out of here and start talking to people in town about Sarah Brennan and missing ledgers and mysterious disappearances." Bennett's eyes had gone sharp, calculating. "You're blackmailing us." "I'm negotiating." "Isn't that what you do, Mr. Bennett? Negotiate?" "This is insane," Ethan said. "Clara, you don't want to do this. This family, this business, it'll poison you. It poisons everyone it touches." Clara looked at him, this weak man who'd lied to her, and felt something almost like pity. "I've been poisoned before. I survived. Question is, will you?" She walked out of the dining room, leaving them all in stunned silence. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through her veins like fire. She'd just declared war on a family that had destroyed anyone who threatened them. It was possibly the stupidest thing she'd ever done. But she'd meant what she said. She wasn't running. Sarah Brennan had run, and the wilderness had swallowed her. Clara would do the opposite. She'd dig in. She'd learn their secrets. She'd find out exactly what this family had done and what they were still hiding, and then she'd decide what justice looked like. Back in her room, Clara locked the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. Through the window, she could see the estate stretching out in the moonlight, beautiful and terrible and full of secrets. Somewhere out there, Sarah Brennan's body was probably rotting. Somewhere in this house, ledgers documented decades of theft and violence. Somewhere in this family, a truth waited to be uncovered. Clara had come to Montana looking for survival. Instead, she'd found a mystery that could kill her. But she'd also found something else, purpose. She might be trapped in this house, in this impossible situation, but she wasn't powerless. She had her wits, her determination, and now she had leverage. The Hales needed her silence as much as she needed their resources. It was a dangerous game. But Clara had been playing dangerous games her whole life. This one, at least, had stakes worth fighting for. She moved to the writing desk, found paper and pen, and began making notes. Everything she'd learned tonight, every admission, every hint. If she was going to do this, she'd do it right. She'd build a case piece by piece until she knew exactly what had happened in this house. And then, somehow, she'd make sure Sarah Brennan's death meant something. A soft knock at the door made her jump. She tucked the papers under the blotter. "Who is it?" "It's me." Lily's voice, muffled by wood. "Please, can I come in?" Clara unlocked the door. Lily slipped inside, the red mark on her cheek already darkening to purple. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered. "I'm so sorry. I should have warned you better. I should have told you everything before you came inside. How could you have warned me? You didn't know I was coming." "I saw the carriage leave for the depot. I knew what it meant." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I've been so alone here, so frightened. When I heard Ethan had sent for another bride, I thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time the woman would be smart enough, strong enough to survive, to help me survive." Clara took the girl's hands. They were cold, trembling. "Tell me everything. No more half-truths. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Lily nodded, sinking onto the bed. It started with the railroad boom. Father saw the opportunity before anyone else. He positioned himself as the middleman, the person who could convince homesteaders to sell their land for the railroad's right-of-way. At first, it really was just negotiation. But then he realized he could make more money if he forced the sales, if he made people desperate enough that they'd accept any price. How did he make them desperate? Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. Accidents. Fires. Livestock dying mysteriously. Loans being called in suddenly. He had connections, bankers, sheriffs, hired men who'd do anything for money. He'd systematically destroy a family until they had no choice but to sell, and Father would buy the land for pennies, then turn around and sell it to the railroad for a fortune. And your mother knew about this? Mother helped plan it. She was the one who kept the books, who tracked which families were vulnerable, who suggested the most effective strategies. Lily's voice broke. She's smarter than Father ever was. Crueler, too, in her way. Father at least convinced himself he was building something. Mother just wanted power. Clara's mind was racing. The ledgers Sarah found, where are they now? Hidden somewhere in Father's study. I've looked, but I can't find them. Mother must have moved them after Sarah died. After Sarah was killed, you mean? Lily's silence was confirmation enough. Who killed her? Clara asked. Your father? Father was already sick by then. The cancer that killed him 6 months later. He could barely leave his bed. But he gave the order. I heard them arguing that night, Father, Mother, and Bennett. Sarah had threatened to go to the territorial governor to expose everything. They couldn't let her leave. So they sent someone after her. One of Father's old associates, a man named Pike, who'd done similar work before. He caught up with her on the road to town. What happened after? Lily shuddered. I don't know. I don't want to know. But she never arrived in Silver Ridge, and Pike left town the next day with enough money to start a new life somewhere far away. Clara felt sick. Why didn't you go to the authorities? With what proof? I was 15, hysterical with grief over Father's illness. No one would have believed me. And Mother made it clear what would happen if I spoke. She'd send me to an asylum. They do that to inconvenient women, you know. Lock them away and call it treatment. Ethan knows all this? Ethan suspects. He wasn't here when it happened. He was in Denver, trying to learn the business from Father's partners there. By the time he returned, Sarah was gone and Father was dying. Mother told him the same story she told everyone else. I think part of him knows it's a lie, but he's too weak to face the truth. He thinks if he pretends hard enough that Father was just a ruthless businessman instead of a murderer, he can somehow redeem the family name. Clara stood pacing the room. The estate. How much of it was built on stolen land? All of it. Every acre. The house, the cattle operations, the timber holdings. Everything Father owned came from families he destroyed. There are probably 100 families who have legitimate claims to parts of this estate if the truth came out. And Bennett? What's his role? He makes sure nothing comes out. He's been with the family for 20 years. He knows where all the bodies are buried, literally, in some cases. He protects the family because protecting the family protects him. If we fall, he falls with us. Clara stopped pacing. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture even uglier than she'd imagined. This wasn't just about theft or fraud. This was about systematic destruction, about families torn apart, about people who died defending what was theirs. And she was about to marry into the family responsible for all of it. Why does Ethan want a wife? Clara asked. The real reason. Lily hesitated, then said, he's trying to change things, trying to find a way to make restitution without destroying everything. He thought if he married someone from outside the family sphere, someone with no connection to the past, it might help him break free of Mother's control. Give him an ally. He picked a mail-order bride because he thought I'd be grateful enough to be controllable. Probably, but he was wrong about you, wasn't he? Clara laughed, the sound brittle. He certainly was. She turned to Lily. Listen to me carefully. I'm going through with this marriage, not because I forgive the lies and not because I'm afraid to leave. I'm doing it because it's the only way to get access to the evidence I need. Evidence for what? To bring this family down. To make sure everyone who was hurt gets justice. To make sure your father's victims aren't forgotten. Lily's eyes went wide. You can't. Mother will kill you. She's already killed once to protect the family's secrets. She won't hesitate to do it again. Then I'll have to be smarter than Sarah was. I'll have to gather my evidence carefully, build my case thoroughly, and make sure I have protection before I strike. Clara gripped Lily's shoulders. Can you help me? Can you show me where to look? What to avoid? How to navigate this family without raising suspicion? If Mother finds out I'm helping you, then we'll make sure she doesn't find out. We'll be careful, patient. But Lily, I need you. I can't do this alone. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. I'm so tired of being afraid. I'm so tired of living in this house where everything is built on lies and blood. Then help me end it. Help me make sure your father's crimes don't stay buried forever. Lily nodded, her jaw set with new determination. All right, I'll help you. But Clara, we have to be so careful. Mother is watching everything. She doesn't trust you. She's already planning ways to control you, to make sure you never become a threat. Let her plan. I've survived worse than Constance Hale. A clock somewhere in the house chimed midnight. Lily stood, wiping her eyes. I should go. If she finds my bed empty... She moved to the door, then turned back. Clara, thank you for staying, for fighting. Sarah tried to run and it killed her. Maybe standing and fighting is the answer. Maybe, Clara said, or maybe it'll kill us both. But at least we'll die trying to do something right. After Lily left, Clara returned to her notes. She wrote everything down, names, dates, accusations. She documented Lily's testimony, her own observations, every detail she could remember. When she was done, she folded the papers carefully and hid them inside the lining of her trunk, the one place she knew no servant would dare look. Then she lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. Somewhere in this mansion were ledgers that documented decades of theft. Somewhere were contracts that proved fraud. Somewhere, perhaps, were records of the people who'd been killed to keep the secret safe. Clara had 3 days until her wedding. 3 days to start building her case, to start understanding the scope of what the Hale family had done. It wasn't much time, but Clara had learned to work with what she had. She'd come to Montana expecting to marry a farmer and live a simple life of honest work. Instead, she'd stumbled into a conspiracy of wealth built on bones, protected by murder, maintained by fear. But she'd also found something unexpected, a purpose bigger than survival. She would expose the Hale family. She would make sure Sarah Brennan's death was avenged. She would see justice done, no matter what it cost her. And if that meant marrying a liar, living in a house of secrets, and playing a dangerous game with a murderous matriarch, then that's what she'd do. Clara Whitlock had spent her whole life being underestimated, overlooked, dismissed as just another desperate girl trying to survive. It was time to show everyone exactly how wrong they'd been. Clara woke to someone shaking her shoulder. Her eyes snapped open to find Mrs. Baker standing over her, face pinched with worry in the gray pre-dawn light. You need to get up, miss. Quickly. Clara sat up, her heart already racing. What's wrong? Men from town. They're at the front door demanding to see Mrs. Hale. The senior Mrs. Hale. Mrs. Baker's hands twisted in her apron. They're not happy. Clara threw off the covers and reached for her dress. What do they want? I don't know, but they've got rifles. By the time Clara made it downstairs, the confrontation was already underway. Through the front windows, she could see perhaps a dozen men on horseback, their breath-forming clouds in the cold morning air. Constance stood in the open doorway, wrapped in a silk robe that probably cost more than any of those men earned in a year. Gentlemen, Constance was saying, her voice ice-cold and perfectly controlled. This is private property. I suggest you state your business and leave before I have you arrested for trespassing. One of the men dismounted. He was perhaps 40, weathered and lean, with eyes that burned with barely controlled fury. My name's Jack Morrison. My father was Thomas Morrison. You remember him, Mrs. Hale? I'm afraid I don't. Liar. Morrison spat the word. Your husband stole our ranch 15 years ago. Burned our barn, killed our cattle, forced my father into a loan he couldn't repay. Then foreclosed on the property before the ink was dry. My father drank himself to death over what you people did to us. Constance's expression didn't change. Your father made poor business decisions. That's hardly our fault. Poor business decisions? Morrison's voice rose. He had men come in the night. Our hay went up like a torch. Every head of cattle we owned died from poison in the water. And then suddenly the bank, your bank, called in a loan that wasn't due for another year. If you have complaints about business practices, I suggest you take them up with the proper authorities. The authorities you bought? The sheriff who looks the other way? The judges on your payroll? Morrison took a step closer. We know what you are, Mrs. Hale. We know what your husband was. And we're done pretending the law is going to help us. Clara's breath caught. This was spiraling out of control fast. She could see other men reaching for their rifles, could see Constance's hand moving toward something inside her robe. If someone didn't defuse this immediately, blood would be spilled on the front lawn. She pushed past Constance before she could think better of it. Mr. Morrison, Clara said, stepping into the cold. She was barefoot, wearing only her nightgown and a shawl, but she forced herself to walk down the steps toward the armed men. My name is Clara Whitlock. I just arrived yesterday from Boston. I don't know anything about your father or what happened to him, but I can see you're angry, and I think you have a right to be. Who the hell are you? Morrison asked, but his hand had moved away from his gun. I'm supposed to marry Ethan Hale in 3 days, but before I do that, I need to understand exactly what this family has done, what they're responsible for, because I won't be part of covering up crimes. Clara, get back inside, Constance hissed from the doorway. Clara ignored her. Mr. Morrison, you said your father's ranch was stolen. Do you have proof? Documents? Anything that shows what was done to you? Morrison's jaw worked. I've got letters, bills of sale that make no sense, foreclosure notices. But what good are they? No lawyer in this territory will take a case against the Hales. Maybe that's because you haven't found the right lawyer yet. Clara was making this up as she went, her mind racing ahead of her words. Give me 3 days. Let me look into this. If what you're saying is true, if crimes were committed, I'll help you expose them. But if you kill Mrs. Hale right now, you'll hang for murder, and your father's story dies with you. Why should we trust you? You're one of them. I'm not one of them, not yet. And maybe I never will be. Clara looked back at Constance, whose face had gone white with fury. 3 days, Mr. Morrison. That's all I'm asking. If I can't find evidence in 3 days, you can come back and do whatever you think is necessary, but give me a chance to do this the right way. Morrison looked at his men, some silent conversation passing between them. Finally, he nodded. 3 days. But Miss Whitlock, if you're lying to us, if this is some trick to buy time while they get the law on their side, I'll make sure you regret it. Fair enough. The men mounted up and rode away, their horses' hooves thundering against the frozen ground. Clara stood there until they disappeared down the drive, then turned to face Constance. The older woman's eyes were murderous. How dare you? How dare you make promises on behalf of this family? You have no authority here. I just saved your life. You made things infinitely worse. Do you have any idea what you've done? Those men will be back, and when they come, they'll bring others. You've given them hope, and hope is dangerous. It makes desperate men do stupid things. Good, Clara said. Maybe it's time desperate men started doing stupid things. Maybe it's time someone held this family accountable. Constance moved so fast Clara barely saw it coming. Her hand cracked across Clara's face, the ring on her finger cutting skin. Clara tasted blood. You will never speak to me that way again, Constance said, her voice deadly quiet. You are a servant who got ideas above her station. You're a mail-order bride, a charity case we took in out of pity for my son's loneliness. But make no mistake, if you threaten this family, I will destroy you just as thoroughly as I've destroyed everyone else who stood in our way. Clara touched her bleeding cheek and smiled. Just like you destroyed Sarah Brennan? Constance went very still. What did you say? You heard me. I know what happened to her. I know she found the ledgers. I know she ran, and I know she never made it to town. And I know you gave the order to stop her. You know nothing. You have no proof. Not yet, but I will. And Mr. Morrison and his friends are going to help me find it. Constance's laugh was like breaking glass. You stupid girl. You have no idea what you're playing with. The people you think you're helping? They're not innocent. Jack Morrison's father was a drunk and a gambler who mortgaged his ranch 3 times over. We didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. We just picked up the pieces. Then you won't mind if I verify that story, will you? Do whatever you want. You'll find nothing but business transactions, all perfectly legal, all documented and filed with the proper authorities. Constance's smile was sharp. But while you're wasting time chasing ghosts, remember this. You have nowhere to go. No money, no family, no options. You need this marriage as much as Ethan does, so play your little detective game if it makes you feel important. Just don't forget who holds all the cards. She swept back into the house, leaving Clara standing alone in the cold morning air, blood dripping from her cheek onto the pristine gravel drive. Clara pressed her shawl to her face and walked back inside. Her hands were shaking, from cold, from adrenaline, from the realization of just how badly she'd miscalculated. She'd thought facing down armed men would show the Hales she was serious, would force them to take her seriously. Instead, she just painted a target on her back. Ethan appeared from somewhere deeper in the house, his hair disheveled, still pulling on his coat. I heard shouting. What happened? Your mother's past came calling, literally. Clara pushed past him toward the stairs. I need to get dressed. Clara, wait. He caught her arm. Your face. You're bleeding. Your mother has a strong right hook. I'll survive. Ethan's expression darkened. She hit you? I insulted her family's honor. Apparently that's a capital offense in Hale world. Clara pulled her arm free. Don't worry about it, Ethan. It's not the first time someone slapped me, and it won't be the last. It shouldn't have happened at all. His voice carried something Clara hadn't heard before. Actual anger. This has gone too far. I'm calling off the wedding. Clara stopped on the third step. Excuse me? You were right yesterday. This was a terrible idea. Bringing you here, lying about who we are, what we've done, it was all wrong. I'll give you money for the train back to Boston. Enough to start over somewhere else. You don't deserve to be dragged into our family's mess. For a moment, Clara was tempted. To take the money and run, to leave this nightmare behind and never look back. But then she thought of Sarah Brennan, dead in some unmarked grave. She thought of Jack Morrison's father, drinking himself to death over a stolen dream. She thought of all the families whose lives had been crushed to build this mansion. No, she said. What? I said no. The wedding happens in 3 days, exactly as planned. Ethan stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Clara, you just told me last night that you're only doing this to expose us. Why would you want... Because I made a promise to those men. I told them I'd find the truth in 3 days. I can't do that if I'm not part of this family. I need access to the records, the accounts, everything your father kept hidden. Clara descended the steps, meeting his eyes. So here's what's going to happen. We're getting married. You're going to make sure I have complete access to this house and everything in it. And in exchange, I'll try to find a way to make restitution that doesn't end with your mother hanging from a rope. You think you can save us? I think I can try, but only if you help me. Only if you're willing to face what your father did and take responsibility for it. Ethan's laugh was bitter. You don't know what you're asking. Then explain it to me. He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly much older than his years. My father didn't just steal land, Clara. He destroyed lives. Systematically, methodically, efficiently. He'd identify families who had something he wanted, good grazing land, water rights, timber access, and then he'd dismantle them piece by piece. Sometimes it was financial pressure, sometimes it was violence, sometimes it was just making their lives so miserable they'd sell for anything just to escape. How many families? I don't know. Dozens at least, maybe more. The ledgers have names, dates, acquisition prices, but they don't have the full story. They don't have the barn burnings and the poisoned wells and the mysterious accidents. His voice dropped. They don't have the bodies. Clara's blood ran cold. How many bodies? I don't know that either. Father was careful. He used intermediaries, paid men to do his dirty work. But there were rumors, homesteaders who disappeared, ranch hands who asked too many questions, a newspaper editor who wrote an article about land fraud and then died in what they called a hunting accident. And your mother knew all this? She helped orchestrate it. Father had vision, but mother had strategy. She's the one who figured out how to make it all look legal, how to hide the violence behind paperwork and legitimate business transactions. Ethan sank onto the bottom step, his head in his hands. I found out about it 2 years ago, after Father died. I was going through his papers, trying to understand the business, and I found a ledger that didn't match the official books. It had notations like Morrison problem solved and Peterson convinced to relocate. I didn't understand at first. Then I started asking questions, and Mother sat me down and explained exactly what kind of empire I'd inherited. What did you do? I threw up. Then I tried to figure out how to make it right. But it's not that simple, Clara. If I expose what Father did, the entire estate collapses. The land gets seized, the assets frozen. Everyone who works here loses their livelihood. The town's economy tanks because half the businesses depend on our money. And Mother goes to prison, probably hangs. Lily's reputation is destroyed. The Hale name becomes synonymous with murder and theft. It already is, Clara said quietly. Those men this morning, they know. Maybe not everything, but enough. And they're not the only ones. How many other families are out there nursing grudges, waiting for their chance at revenge? Too many to count. Clara sat down beside him on the step. Then here's what we do. We get married, we present a united front to your mother and Bennett, make them think I've been brought into line, that I'm going to be a good, quiet wife who doesn't ask questions. Meanwhile, we find the real ledgers. We document everything, and then we figure out how to make restitution in a way that doesn't destroy everyone. That's impossible. Probably. But it's the only option that doesn't end with more people dying. Clara looked at him. Can you do it? Can you pretend to be the dutiful son while we work against your mother? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. She'll know. She always knows. Then we'll have to be smarter than she is. No one's smarter than Mother. I am, Clara said with more confidence than she felt. She underestimates me because I'm poor and desperate. That's her weakness. She thinks she can control me with fear and money, but she's wrong. I've survived things she can't even imagine, Ethan. Factory floors where girls lost fingers and kept working because they needed the wages. Landlords who'd lock you out in winter over 50 cents. I've been hungry enough to steal and desperate enough to do things I'm not proud of. Your mother's never known real desperation. That makes her vulnerable. Ethan looked at her with something like wonder. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. The advertisement said simple farmer. I got a guilt-ridden heir to a criminal empire. We're both full of surprises. Clara stood. So are we doing this or not? You're absolutely sure. Once you marry into this family, there's no going back. Whatever we find, whatever we do, you'll be tied to it forever. Clara thought about that. Thought about the life she'd left behind in Boston, the grinding poverty and endless fear. Thought about the life she'd expected here, hard work and simple survival. And thought about the life she was choosing instead, dangerous, complicated, possibly short, but at least meaningful. I'm sure, she said. 3 days. We get married, and then we burn your family's lies to the ground. Ethan extended his hand. Partners? Clara shook it. His palm was warm, steady. Partners. The rest of that day passed in a blur of preparations Clara hadn't asked for and didn't want. Constance, having apparently decided that violence was ineffective, switched to a different strategy, overwhelming control. A seamstress appeared to fit Clara for a wedding dress. A minister arrived to discuss the ceremony. Bennett showed up with more contracts and documents to sign. Through it all, Clara played her part. She was meek when Constance issued orders. She was grateful when the seamstress presented her with a dress that probably cost more than Clara's entire life earnings. She was appropriately awed when Bennett explained the legal intricacies of joining the Hale family. But when no one was watching, she explored. The house was enormous, full of rooms that seemed to serve no purpose other than displaying wealth. Clara found a ballroom that looked like it had never been used. She found a library with leather-bound books still in their shipping crates. She found bedrooms furnished with the kind of care that suggested they were waiting for guests who would never arrive. She also found locked doors. 3 of them on the 2nd floor, 1 on the 3rd. She tested the handles carefully, making sure no one was watching. They didn't budge. Whatever was behind those doors, Constance wanted it protected. That evening, Clara cornered Mrs. Baker in the kitchen. Those locked rooms upstairs, Clara said, keeping her voice casual. What's in them? Mrs. Baker's hand stilled over the potatoes she was peeling. I don't know, miss. I've never been in them. In all the years you've worked here. Mrs. Hale keeps the keys herself, says some rooms are private family matters. Mrs. Baker's voice dropped. But I've heard things, late at night, footsteps, doors opening and closing. Someone goes in there regularly. Constance? Or Mr. Bennett? Sometimes both of them together carrying boxes. Mrs. Baker glanced toward the door, making sure they were alone. Miss Whitlock, can I speak plainly? Please. Leave this alone. Whatever's in those rooms, it's not meant for you to find. The family's been protecting those secrets for years. They won't take kindly to someone poking around. I know, but I have to try. Mrs. Baker's eyes were sad. Just like Miss Sarah said, she told me the same thing 3 days before she disappeared. I have to try, she said. I can't just pretend I don't know. And look what happened to her. Claire's heart skipped. You knew Sarah. She was a sweet girl, scared but determined. She arrived full of hope, just like you. Thought she could make a difference. Mrs. Baker's voice cracked. They found her horse wandering near Devil's Canyon. That's a bad stretch of land, steep cliffs, loose rock. Easy place to have an accident, or to make something look like an accident. Mrs. Baker, do you think she was murdered? The older woman's hands resumed peeling, but her movements were mechanical, automatic. I think curiosity is dangerous in this house, Miss Whitlock. I think asking too many questions gets people hurt. And I think if you're smart, you'll marry Mr. Ethan, keep your head down, and live a long, quiet life pretending you don't see what's right in front of you. I can't do that. Then may mercy find you, because the Hales certainly won't. That night, Clara lay awake thinking about locked rooms and hidden ledgers, and a girl named Sarah who'd asked too many questions. Moonlight streamed through her window, painting silver bars across the floor. The house creaked and settled around her, old wood adjusting to the cold. A soft click made her freeze. It came from the hallway. The sound of a door opening very carefully, someone trying not to be heard. Clara slipped out of bed and pressed her ear to her own door. Footsteps, soft and measured. Someone moving with purpose through the dark house. She counted to 10, then eased her door open a crack. The hallway was dark except for a sliver of light coming from under one of the locked doors. As Clara watched, a shadow passed in front of it. Someone was inside. Clara knew she should stay in her room, knew that getting caught would destroy whatever trust she'd built with Ethan, would confirm Constance's suspicions. But she also knew she might not get another chance like this. She grabbed her shawl and stepped into the hallway. The floorboards were cold under her bare feet. She moved slowly, testing each step before putting her weight down, trying to avoid the creaks. The locked door was perhaps 20 feet away. The light underneath it flickered. Candlelight, not a lamp. Claire reached the door and pressed her ear against it. Papers rustling. The scratch of pen on paper. Someone working late, documenting something they didn't want documented in daylight. Clara tried the handle. Still locked, but now she could hear movement on the other side. Whoever was in there had heard her. The footsteps approached. Clara backed away, her heart hammering. She'd been stupid, reckless. The door opened. Lily stood there in her nightgown, holding a candle, her eyes wide with fear. Clara, what are you doing out here? I could ask you the same thing, Clara whispered. I thought that door was locked. It is. I have a key. Lily glanced down the hallway, then grabbed Clara's wrist. Get inside, quickly. Clara stepped into the room, and Lily shut the door behind them, turning the key with a soft click. The room was an office, but not like any office Clara had seen before. Every wall was covered with filing cabinets and shelves. Papers were stacked everywhere. On the desk, on chairs, in neat piles on the floor. It looked like someone had tried to organize the entire history of the Hale family and run out of space. What is this place? Clara breathed. Father's real office, where he kept everything that mattered. Lily set the candle on the desk. Mother thinks she's the only one with a key. She doesn't know Father gave me one before he died. He wanted someone to know the truth, I think. Wanted to confess, even if it was just to a frightened child. Clara moved to the desk. Papers covered it. Land deeds, contracts, letters. But underneath those, barely visible, she could see the edge of a leather-bound book. A ledger. Is that one of them? There are 6 total. 6 books documenting every crime Father committed over 30 years. Lily's voice was hollow. I've been reading them at night, trying to understand what we are, what I come from. Clara reached for the ledger, but Lily caught her hand. Wait. Before you look, you need to understand something. Once you read these, you can't unknow what's in them. You'll be carrying the same weight I carry, the same guilt. I'm already guilty, Claire said. I promised those men I'd find the truth. I can't do that if I'm afraid to face it. Lily released her hand. Then look. But don't say I didn't warn you. Clara opened the ledger. The handwriting was neat, almost beautiful. Careful script that belied the ugliness of what it recorded. March 12, 1868. Morrison property acquired. Initial pressure applied. Barn fire. Livestock poisoning. T. Morrison proving stubborn. Recommended escalation. March 20th, 1868. Second pressure applied. Well contaminated. Crop failure insured. T. Morrison accepting loan terms. March 28th, 1868. Loan called in early. Morrison defaulted as expected. Property foreclosed. Profit margin. 340%. April 2nd, 1868. Morrison's eldest son making threats. Pike dispatched to handle situation. Problem resolved permanently. Claire's hands shook as she turned the pages. Entry after entry, family after family. The ledger read like a how-to manual for destroying lives. There were notations about timing, about which banks to use, about which sheriffs would look the other way. There were names Clara recognized from town. Morrison, Peterson, half a dozen others, and names she didn't, families who'd probably left the territory or died trying to stay. And there were the coded entries. Problem resolved permanently. Situation handled discreetly. Witness eliminated. How many? Clara asked, her voice barely audible. I've counted 17 that are clearly murders, but there are probably more that are coded in ways I don't understand. Lily sat down heavily in the desk chair. Father kept records of everything because he thought it made him powerful. He thought if he documented every crime, every payment, every person who helped him, he'd have leverage, insurance. Against whom? Against everyone. The railroad, the banks, the territorial government. They all benefited from what Father did. They all looked the other way because it was profitable. Father made sure he had proof of their complicity. That way, if anyone ever tried to come after him, he could drag them down too. Clara's mind was racing. This wasn't just evidence against one family. This was evidence against an entire corrupt system. Railroad executives who'd paid for land theft, bankers who'd called in loans on schedule, lawmen who'd ignored murders in exchange for payments. We need to copy these, Clara said. Every page. We need evidence we can take outside the family. And then what? Who do we give it to? Every official in the territory is either in those books or scared of the people who are. Lily's laugh was bitter. That's the genius of it. Father didn't just build a fortune. He built a prison for everyone who helped him build it. We're all trapped. Clara thought about Jack Morrison and his men riding up with rifles in righteous anger. They weren't trapped. They were free in their poverty and their rage. The railroad, Clara said slowly. Your father's records implicate the railroad? Of course, they were his main partner. Why? Because railroads have enemies, competitors, rival companies who'd love to expose corruption in the Northern Pacific. Clara's excitement was building. And there are federal investigators who oversee railroad land grants. If we could get this information to them, they'd bury it. They're all bought and paid for. Not all of them. Clara thought back to her time in Boston, to the factory where she'd worked. There had been an investigation into working conditions, a federal agent who'd actually cared, who'd pushed for reforms even when local officials tried to stop him. Men like that existed. They were rare, but they existed. Even if we found an honest investigator, how would we get the evidence to him without Mother finding out? Lily asked. Clara looked at the ledgers, at the cabinets full of documents, at the decades of carefully recorded crimes. We start small. We copy pages carefully, a few at a time, so no one notices they've been disturbed. We hide our copies somewhere safe, and we wait for the right moment. The wedding, Lily said suddenly. There will be guests, people from town, business associates, the minister. Bennett will be distracted with the ceremony. Mother will be focused on maintaining appearances. It's the perfect time to work. Assuming your mother actually goes through with it, she might decide I'm too dangerous and call the whole thing off. She won't. Calling it off would show weakness, would make people ask questions. Mother would rather marry you to Ethan and control you than admit she made a mistake. Lily stood. But Clara, you need to be careful. If she even suspects you've been in here, I know, I'll be careful. Clara closed the ledger, committing what she could to memory. Can you let me in here again, before the wedding? Tomorrow night. Same time, but only for an hour. Any longer, and we risk someone noticing. They left the office separately, Lily first, then Clara, after counting to 50. The hallway was still dark, still silent. Clara made it back to her room without incident, but her heart didn't stop racing until she was safely behind her locked door. She sat at the writing desk and began reconstructing what she'd read, writing down every detail she could remember. Names, dates, methods. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the first gray light of dawn started seeping through the window. When Mrs. Baker knocked to wake her, Clara had barely slept. But she had pages of notes hidden in her trunk lining, and she had a plan. 2 more days until the wedding. 2 more days to gather evidence, to build her case, to prepare for whatever came next. Clara dressed and went down to breakfast. Constance was already there, reading correspondence with her coffee. She looked up when Clara entered, her eyes assessing. You look tired, Miss Whitlock. I didn't sleep well. The house makes strange noises at night. Old buildings settle. You'll get used to it. Constance's smile was thin. I trust you'll look more rested for the wedding. We can't have the bride appearing haggard. I'll do my best. Ethan arrived, followed by Bennett carrying yet another stack of papers. The routine of breakfast proceeded, food served, coffee poured, meaningless pleasantries exchanged. But underneath the civilized surface, Clara could feel the tension. Everyone at this table knew what the others were capable of. Everyone was playing a game, trying to outmaneuver each other. Clara ate mechanically, planning her next move. She needed to get a message to Jack Morrison, needed to let him know she was making progress. But how could she get to town without raising suspicion? As if reading her mind, Ethan said, Clara, I thought you might like to see Silver Ridge properly. We could go into town this afternoon, visit some of the shops. You'll need to familiarize yourself with the area if you're going to live here. Constance's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. Is that wise, given yesterday's unpleasantness? Which is exactly why we should go. We need to show the town that we're not afraid, that life continues normally. Ethan looked at Clara. Unless you'd rather stay here? No, Clara said quickly. I'd like to see the town. Bennett frowned. Perhaps I should accompany you, for safety. That won't be necessary, Ethan said firmly. We'll take the carriage, stay on Main Street, visit only respectable establishments. We'll be fine. The look Constance gave her son was calculating. Very well, but be back before dark. And Ethan, remember who you are. Remember what's at stake. I always do, Mother. They left after lunch, the carriage rolling down the long drive toward town. Clara waited until they were well away from the house before speaking. You did that on purpose. Gave me a chance to contact Morrison. I did. Ethan stared out the window. I've been thinking about what you said, about making restitution, about facing what Father did. You're right, we can't keep running from the truth. So you'll help me? Really help me, not just pretend? I'll help you, but Clara, you need to understand, Mother will fight this every step of the way. She's not going to let us dismantle everything Father built without a battle. Oh, let her fight. I'm not afraid of her. Ethan's laugh was soft. You should be. You have no idea what she's capable of. Then tell me. Stop protecting me and tell me what I'm really up against. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, like he was recounting something that had happened to someone else. When I was 12, there was a maid who worked in the house. Young woman, maybe 20, pretty. She and Father had an affair. When she got pregnant, she tried to blackmail him. Said she'd tell Mother, tell the town, ruin his reputation unless he paid her. Clara's stomach sank. What happened to her? Mother handled it. I don't know the details, but the maid disappeared. Her family was told she'd run off to San Francisco to start over. They even got letters from her for a while. Letters Mother had forged. The baby was born in secret and given to a family downstate. The maid was never seen again. Your mother killed a pregnant girl? I don't know if she did it herself or had someone else do it, but yes, she killed a girl who threatened the family's reputation. Ethan finally looked at her. That's who you're fighting, Clara. A woman who will murder to protect her secrets. So please, be careful. Be smart. Don't give her any excuse to... He stopped as the carriage rolled into town. Silver Ridge looked different in daylight, less ominous, more normal. People moved along the boardwalks, going about their business. But Clara noticed how they stared as the Hale carriage passed, how conversation stopped and eyes followed. The carriage stopped in front of the general store. Ethan helped Clara down and they went inside together. The proprietor, a man in his 50s with nervous eyes, greeted them with obsequious courtesy. Mr. Hale! Miss Whitlock, such an honor to have you in my establishment. Please, let me know if you need anything. Anything at all. Ethan was examining fabric samples, playing his part as the attentive fiancé. Clara browsed the shelves, moving toward the back of the store where she could see a man sorting supplies. It was Morrison. He looked up, saw her, and his jaw tightened. Clara glanced back to make sure Ethan was still occupied, then moved closer. Tomorrow night, she whispered. Can you meet me at the church? After dark? Morrison's eyes narrowed. Why? Because I found what you need, proof. But I can't bring it out in daylight. Tomorrow night, 11 o'clock. Can you be there? He studied her face, trying to decide if she was trustworthy. Finally, he nodded once. I'll be there. But if this is a trap, it's not, I promise. Clara picked up a spool of thread at random. How much for this? Morrison named a price, and Clara moved back toward the front of the store. Ethan was paying for the fabric, chatting with the proprietor about wedding preparations. They left a few minutes later, Clara's heart pounding. She'd done it. She'd made contact, set up a meeting. Now she just had to survive until tomorrow night and figure out how to get the ledger copies out of the house without getting caught. As the carriage rolled back toward Blackwood Estate, Clara watched the sun setting over the mountains. Beautiful country, she thought. Strange how something so pretty could hide so much ugliness underneath. Did you find what you needed? Ethan asked quietly. Yes. Good. He didn't ask for details. Maybe he didn't want to know. They rode the rest of the way in silence, two people bound together by necessity and secrets, heading back to a house built on blood, where tomorrow Clara would become part of the family she was trying to destroy. She just had to hope she lived long enough to finish what she'd started. The wedding dress hung in Clara's room like a ghost, white silk catching the lamplight. Tomorrow she'd wear it, stand in front of a minister, and legally bind herself to a family of murderers. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt oddly calm, the way she imagined soldiers felt before battle, past the fear into that cold place where only purpose mattered. She checked her pocket watch. 10:45. 15 minutes until she was supposed to meet Morrison at the church. The house had settled into its nighttime rhythms. Constance had retired an hour ago, Ethan shortly after. Mrs. Baker had finished in the kitchen and gone to her room off the servants' wing. Only Lily knew what Clara was planning, and she was keeping watch at the top of the stairs, ready to signal if anyone stirred. Clara tucked the folded papers inside her shawl, copies she and Lily had spent the past 2 nights making by candlelight, fingers cramping, eyes burning, transcribing page after page of her father-in-law's meticulous record of destruction. They'd only managed to copy portions of 2 ledgers, but it was enough. Names, dates, methods, 17 confirmed murders. 43 families destroyed. Payments to sheriffs, judges, railroad executives. It was enough to start a firestorm. Clara eased her door open. The hallway was dark except for a sliver of moonlight through the window at the far end. Lily's shadow appeared at the top of the stairs, giving a quick signal, all clear. Clara moved quickly but carefully, counting steps, avoiding the board she knew creaked. Down the stairs, through the entrance hall, past the portrait of Old Man Hale with his cruel mouth and dead eyes. She wondered if he'd known, when he was documenting his crimes so carefully, that someday his own granddaughter would use those records to destroy everything he'd built. The front door was locked, but the key hung on a hook nearby. Clara turned it slowly, wincing at the soft click. Then she was outside, the November air sharp in her lungs, stars scattered overhead like broken glass. The church was a 20-minute walk across the estate grounds. Clara had checked the route earlier, memorizing landmarks so she wouldn't get lost in the dark. Past the stables, through the orchard, along the fence line that separated Hale land from what used to be Morrison land before it was stolen. She was halfway to the orchard when she heard the footsteps behind her. Clara froze, her heart lurching. Someone was following her. She could hear them trying to be quiet, failing, boots on gravel, breathing slightly labored. She turned, ready to run or fight or... Wait! Bennett stepped into the moonlight, his lawyer's face unreadable. "Miss Whitlock, out for a midnight stroll?" Clara's mind raced. "I couldn't sleep. The wedding tomorrow, I needed air. In the middle of the night, alone? How reckless." Bennett moved closer, and Clara saw he was carrying something. A lantern, unlit. Or perhaps you're meeting someone. Someone who has no business on Hale property? "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" Bennett's smile was thin. "I saw you talking to Jack Morrison in the general store yesterday. Saw the way you passed him that note. Did you really think no one was watching?" Clara's blood went cold. She'd been so careful, or so she'd thought, but apparently not careful enough. "I was just asking about thread," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Thread? Of course." Bennett sighed. "Miss Whitlock, Clara, I'm going to give you some advice, and I strongly suggest you take it. Go back to the house. Marry Ethan tomorrow. Live a quiet, comfortable life. Forget about ledgers and dead mail-order brides and families who claim they were wronged. Because if you continue down this path, you will not survive it." Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. You're playing a game you don't understand against opponents who've been doing this for 30 years. You cannot win. The best you can hope for is to walk away intact. Clara thought about the papers hidden in her shawl, about Morrison waiting at the church, about Sarah Brennan's body somewhere in the wilderness. "I can't walk away. Not now." Bennett's expression shifted. Something like regret crossed his features. "Then I'm sorry. Truly. You seem like a decent person. It's unfortunate that decency so rarely survives contact with reality." He raised his hand, and Clara saw he was holding a pistol. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She threw herself sideways as the gun fired, the shot impossibly loud in the quiet night. Pain seared across her arm, a graze, not a direct hit. She hit the ground hard, rolled, scrambled to her feet. Bennett was raising the gun again. A rock struck him square in the temple. He stumbled, the gun dropping from his hand. Another rock hit his shoulder, then another. Lily appeared from behind the orchard trees, her nightgown pale in the moonlight, her face fierce. "Run!" she screamed at Clara. "I'll hold him off! Run!" Clara didn't need to be told twice. She ran, clutching her bleeding arm, the paper still somehow secure in her shawl. Behind her, she could hear Bennett cursing, Lily shouting. Then another gunshot. Clara's legs nearly gave out. She spun around, terrified she'd see Lily's body on the ground. But Lily was still standing, still throwing rocks. Bennett was on one knee, aiming at her. Clara didn't think. She charged back, picking up a fallen branch as she ran. She swung it hard, catching Bennett across the back. He went down with a grunt. "Lily, move!" The girl didn't hesitate. She ran to Clara's side, both of them backing away as Bennett struggled to his feet. Blood ran down his face from where the rock had hit him. His eyes were murderous. "You stupid girls," he panted. "You think you've won something? All you've done is guarantee your own deaths." "Maybe," Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But at least we'll die fighting instead of living as cowards." She grabbed Lily's hand and ran. They crashed through the orchard, branches tearing at their clothes. Clara could hear Bennett behind them, slower but still coming. The church was ahead, its white steeple visible against the stars. Morrison was waiting by the door, along with 3 other men. They all had rifles. "What the hell happened?" Morrison demanded, taking in Clara's bleeding arm, Lily's torn nightgown, the sound of someone crashing through the trees behind them. "Bennett found out," Clara gasped. "He tried to kill us." "Is he armed?" "Pistol. 1 shot left. Maybe 2. Morrison nodded to his men. They fanned out, rifles ready. A moment later, Bennett emerged from the trees and stopped dead when he saw the welcoming committee. You're trespassing, Bennett said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. This is Hale property. I'm within my rights to defend it. Funny, Morrison said. That's what my father said when your hired thugs came to burn our barn. Didn't stop them from killing him. I have no idea what you're talking about. Liar, Clara stepped forward, pulling the papers from her shawl. But that's fine. We don't need your confession. We have your employer's records. She handed the papers to Morrison. He unfolded them, holding them up to catch the moonlight. His face went white as he read. This is... His voice cracked. This is everything. Names, dates, payments. It's all here. That's only part of it, Lily said quietly. There are 6 ledgers total, 30 years of crimes. One of Morrison's men was reading over his shoulder. Jesus. They really did murder your father. And the Petersons and the Johnsons, all of them. Bennett's hand moved toward his gun. Every rifle swung toward him. I wouldn't, Morrison said softly. Give me an excuse, please. Bennett's hand stilled. His lawyer's brain was working. Clara could see it, calculating odds and options. Those papers won't hold up in court. No chain of custody, no authentication. You can't prove they're genuine. Maybe not in a territorial court, Clara said. But what about a federal investigation? What about newspapers in Denver and San Francisco? What about the families who were destroyed? Do you think they'll care about legal technicalities when they finally have proof of what was done to them? You're talking about starting a war. No. I'm talking about ending one. Your war. The one your employers have been waging against innocent people for 3 decades. Bennett looked at her, and for the first time, Clara saw something other than cold calculation in his eyes. Fear. Constance will kill you for this, he said. Both of you. She'll make it look like an accident, and no one will be able to prove otherwise. Then we'd better move fast. Clara turned to Morrison. How quickly can you get copies of these documents to people who matter? Newspapers? Federal investigators? Anyone who can act on them? Morrison was still reading, his hands shaking with rage or grief, or both. I know a territorial marshal in Helena. He's honest, or as honest as they come. And there's a newspaper editor in Butte who's been trying to investigate railroad corruption for years. If we can get him these documents, then do it. Tonight, make as many copies as you can and spread them everywhere. Make sure so many people have this information that the Hales can't kill all of them. What about you? Morrison asked. And the girl? You can't go back to that house. We have to, Lily said. If we run now, Mother will know something's wrong. She'll destroy the original ledgers, pay off everyone she needs to, and by the time any investigation starts, there won't be evidence left to find. Clara nodded. We need to get back before we're missed. Act normal. Give you time to distribute the copies. That's insane, one of Morrison's men said. You're walking back into a death trap. Maybe, but it's the only way this works. Claire looked at Bennett. What about him? Tie him up, Morrison said. Lock him in the church basement. By the time anyone finds him, we'll have distributed enough copies that it won't matter what he tells Constance. 2 of the men grabbed Bennett. He didn't resist, but his eyes never left Claire's face. You've just killed yourself, he said quietly. Both of you. Constance won't let this stand. We'll see. They secured Bennett in the church basement, Morrison promising to guard him personally. Then Clara and Lily ran back toward the house, Clara's arm throbbing, both of them filthy and exhausted. The house was still dark when they arrived. No lights, no signs that anyone had noticed their absence. They slipped in through the front door, locked it behind them, and crept up the stairs. At the top, they paused. Lily hugged Clara suddenly, fiercely. Thank you, she whispered, for not running, for fighting. Thank me when we survive this. They parted, each heading to their own room. Clara washed the blood from her arm. The bullet had only grazed her, but it still hurt like hell, and changed into a clean nightgown. She hid her torn, bloody clothes in the back of the wardrobe. Then she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for dawn. Sleep was impossible. Every sound made her jump. Every creak of the house felt like Constance's footsteps coming to exact revenge. But the hours passed, and no one came. When Mrs. Baker knocked on her door at 6, Clara almost screamed. "Wedding day, Miss Whitlock," the housekeeper called through the door. "Time to get ready." Clara's laugh was slightly hysterical. She was getting married today, to a man she barely knew, into a family she was actively trying to destroy, in a house where people got murdered for asking too many questions. It was possibly the stupidest thing she'd ever done. She dressed in the silk gown, let Mrs. Baker arrange her hair, pinned on the veil that made her look like something from a fairy tale. A dark fairy tale, maybe, where the princess married the dragon's son and burned down the castle from the inside. Downstairs, the house had been transformed. Flowers everywhere, white ribbons, candles. A small crowd of guests had gathered, business associates, town dignitaries, people Constance wanted to impress. The minister stood by the fireplace, looking uncomfortable. Constance appeared in a black dress that made her look like she was attending a funeral rather than a wedding. Maybe she was, Clara thought. The funeral of her family's secrets. "Where's Bennett?" Constance asked, her eyes sharp. "He was supposed to be here an hour ago to witness the contract signing." "I haven't seen him since yesterday," Ethan said. "Perhaps he was delayed in town." "Bennett is never delayed." Constance's gaze swept the room, landing on Clara. "You look pale, Miss Whitlock. Cold feet?" "Just nerves," Clara said. "How understandable. After all, you're marrying into quite a prominent family. The responsibility must be overwhelming." There was something in Constance's voice, a warning, a threat, a reminder of exactly what Clara was getting into. But Clara just smiled. "I'm sure I'll manage." The ceremony began. Clara stood next to Ethan, barely hearing the minister's words. She was watching the door, waiting for Morrison's men to burst in, or for Constance to suddenly announce she knew everything, or for Bennett to appear with a gun. But none of that happened. The ceremony proceeded normally. Clara said her vows. Ethan said his. They exchanged rings, a simple gold band that felt like a shackle on Clara's finger. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Ethan kissed her, brief and chaste. The guests applauded. Constance smiled that paper-thin smile, and Clara became a Hale. The reception was torture. Clara had to smile and accept congratulations from people who probably knew exactly what kind of family she'd married into. She had to eat cake and drink champagne and pretend this was a happy occasion instead of a strategic maneuver in a war that might get her killed. Lily appeared at her elbow during a lull. "Mother's looking for Bennett," she whispered. "She sent men to his office, his house. She knows something's wrong." "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe. Once she figures out he's missing, she'll tear this estate apart looking for answers." Clara glanced at Constance, who was talking to a railroad executive, her face animated in a way that looked fake and rehearsed. "Then we need to move faster than planned." "What do you mean?" "I mean we get those ledgers tonight, all 6 of them. We take them to Helena ourselves, directly to the federal marshal. We don't wait for Morrison to distribute copies. We bring the originals and dare anyone to deny they're real." "That's suicide. Mother will stop us." "Not if we time it right. Not if we wait until she's distracted." Clara's mind was racing now, forming a plan that was probably insane but might be their only chance. "The guests will be here for another few hours. Constance has to play hostess, has to maintain appearances. That's when we move. We'll need help. We can't carry 6 ledgers plus all the supporting documents alone." "Ethan," Clara said, "we bring him in. Fully. No more half measures." Lily looked doubtful. "He's weak. He won't stand against Mother." "He will if he thinks it's his only option. And it is. Once those ledgers go public, there's no going back. The family falls, and Ethan falls with it unless he gets ahead of it. Unless he cooperates, shows he's willing to make restitution." It was a gamble. But this entire thing had been a gamble from the moment Clara stepped off that train. An hour later, Clara found Ethan alone in the library, staring at a glass of whiskey like it held answers. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "About what? Our sham of a marriage? The fact that you're planning to destroy my family? Or maybe the fact that Bennett has disappeared and Mother looks like she's about to start executing people?" "All of it." Clara sat down across from him. "Bennett tried to kill me last night. He knew I was meeting Morrison, knew I had copied pages from your father's ledgers. He shot at me." Ethan's head snapped up. "What?" "Lily saved me. We fought him off, and Morrison's men took him. He's locked up in the church basement right now, and Morrison is distributing copies of those ledger pages to every newspaper and law enforcement office within 100 miles. The color drained from Ethan's face. You actually did it. You actually started a war. I finished one. Your father started it 30 years ago when he decided that building a fortune was worth destroying lives. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. The truth will destroy everything. The estate, the family name, our livelihood. Good. It should be destroyed. It's built on bones, Ethan. Your father murdered 17 people. 17. And those are just the ones he bothered to record. How many others are there? How many families torn apart? How many lives ruined? Ethan's hands were shaking. I know. I know what he did. I've been trying to find a way to make it right without consequences? There have to be consequences. Otherwise, nothing changes. Your mother goes on living in luxury, the families your father destroyed get nothing, and in 20 years, someone else does the same thing because they saw that the Hales got away with it. So what do you want from me? Help us get the ledgers out. Tonight. All 6 of them, plus any supporting documents. We take them to Helena, turn them over to federal authorities. You cooperate fully, show you're willing to expose the crimes, and make restitution. Maybe that buys you some mercy. Maybe it doesn't. But at least you'll know you tried to do the right thing. Ethan laughed bitterly. The right thing. My father used to say the right thing was whatever made you successful. My mother says the right thing is whatever protects the family. And now you're telling me the right thing is destroying everything I've ever known. Yes, Clara said simply. That's exactly what I'm telling you. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the estate. The manicured gardens, the distant cattle, all the visible proof of his father's success. If I help you, my mother will never forgive me. If you don't help me, you'll never forgive yourself. The silence stretched between them. Outside, Clara could hear the reception continuing. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. All those people celebrating a wedding, oblivious to the fact that the family they were toasting was about to implode. Finally, Ethan turned back to her. All right, I'll help you. But we do this my way. We don't just steal the ledgers, we document everything. We make a complete inventory of what's in them, create an index that makes it impossible for the authorities to ignore or misinterpret. We do this right. How long will that take? A few hours. We start tonight, work through the night if we have to. By morning, we'll have everything we need. A commotion erupted from somewhere in the house. Raised voices, shouting. Clara and Ethan exchanged glances and ran toward the noise. They found Constance in the entrance hall, surrounded by her men. She was holding a telegram, her face white with fury. What's happened? Ethan asked. Constance looked at him, and Clara saw something she'd never seen before in the older woman's eyes. Genuine fear. The Helena Gazette just published an article, Constance said, her voice shaking, about land fraud and railroad corruption. They're naming your father specifically. They're claiming to have documentation of murders, theft, systematic destruction of homesteaders. She looked at Clara. You. This is your doing. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. Constance's control shattered. You've been in those locked rooms. You've been copying the ledgers. You've been meeting with Morrison and his people. I should have killed you the moment you arrived. Should have done to you what I did to Sarah Brennan. The room went silent. Every guest, every servant, everyone heard Constance's confession. Mother, Ethan whispered, what are you saying? I'm saying I had her killed. Is that what you want to hear? Sarah Brennan found the ledgers, just like this one did. She threatened to expose us, so I had Pike deal with her, just like I had him deal with everyone else who threatened this family. A woman in the crowd gasped. Someone else started backing toward the door. You killed her, Ethan said, his voice hollow. You really killed her. I protected this family, protected you. Everything I've done has been to preserve what your father built, to ensure the Hale name would endure. Constance's eyes were wild now, desperate. And I won't let some Boston gutter trash destroy it all. She pulled a Derringer from her dress. Small gun, meant for close range. She pointed it directly at Clara's heart. Mother, no. Ethan moved, but he was too far away. The gun fired. Clara felt the impact like being punched in the chest. She stumbled backward, waiting for pain, waiting to feel her life pour out of her. But there was no pain, no blood. She looked down. The bullet had hit the wedding dress, right over her heart, but the fabric was intact. The bullet had lodged in the whalebone corset stays underneath, the ones Mrs. Baker had laced so tight Clara could barely breathe. The corset had saved her life. Constance stood frozen, the derringer smoking in her hand. She'd just tried to murder someone in front of a room full of witnesses. There was no talking her way out of this, no legal maneuvering that could save her. Morrison appeared in the doorway, followed by a man Clara didn't recognize, older, wearing a badge. "Mrs. Constance Hale," the man said, his voice carrying authority. "I'm Marshal Davis from Helena. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and approximately 43 counts of theft. Men, secure her." Two deputies moved forward. Constance didn't resist. She just stood there, the gun falling from her hand, her face empty. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "You think you've won, but you don't understand. The people I worked with, the people who benefited from what we did, they're powerful, they're connected. They'll make this go away. They'll bury you instead of me." "Maybe," Clara said, pressing her hand to her chest where the bullet had struck. "Or maybe they'll realize the best way to save themselves is to throw you to the wolves. Either way, you're done." The deputies led Constance away. The guests fled, scandalized and horrified, already composing the gossip they'd spread. The house that had been full of laughter and celebration was suddenly empty except for Clara, Ethan, Lily, Morrison, and the marshal. "Miss Whitlock," the marshal said, "or should I say Mrs. Hale, I'm going to need to take your statement, and I'll need access to those ledgers I've been hearing about." "Of course." Clara's legs finally gave out. She sat down hard on the stairs, her whole body shaking. "They're upstairs. Locked office, third door on the left. Lily has a key." The marshal nodded to one of his men. Lily led them upstairs, her face pale but determined. Ethan sat down next to Clara. They didn't speak, just sat there in their wedding clothes, in the wreckage of what should have been a celebration. "I'm sorry," Ethan said finally. "For all of it. For lying to you, for dragging you into this, for everything my family has done." "I know. I'll cooperate with the investigation. I'll help them understand the documents, identify everyone who was involved. I'll make sure the families your father hurt get whatever restitution is possible." "I know you will. And the marriage. If you want an annulment, I'll understand. You didn't sign up for this, any of this." Clara thought about that, thought about the life she'd left behind in Boston, the life she'd expected here, and the life she'd somehow ended up with instead. "Ask me again in a month, when we see how much of this we survive." Morrison approached, holding out his hand. "Mrs. Hale, I owe you an apology. When you first arrived, I thought you were just another pawn in their game. I was wrong." Clara shook his hand. "You were right to be suspicious. I was a pawn, but I decided to become something else instead." "What's that?" "A witness. Someone who saw the truth and refused to look away." Morrison smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "My father would have liked you." The marshal came back downstairs carrying one of the ledgers, his face grim. "This is extensive. It's going to take months to sort through all of this, to identify all the crimes, all the victims. Mrs. Hale, I'm going to need you and your husband to remain available for questioning. Don't leave the territory." "We're not going anywhere," Clara said. After the marshal and his men left, the house felt impossibly quiet. Servants had fled or were hiding in their quarters. The reception decorations looked absurd now, flowers and ribbons celebrating a union that had served as the catalyst for a family's destruction. Clara stood, wincing as her bruised chest protested. The bullet was still lodged in her corset. She'd probably keep it, she thought, a reminder of how close she'd come to dying and how unexpected salvation could be. "I need to change out of this dress," she said, "and then I need to sleep for about a week." "Clara," Lily's voice came from the top of the stairs. "There's something you should see." Clara climbed the stairs, Ethan following. Lily led them to the locked office, where the marshal's men had removed all 6 ledgers and most of the supporting documents. But Lily was pointing to a small box on the floor, half hidden behind a filing cabinet. The marshal's men didn't see it. but I think you should open it. Clara knelt and opened the box. Inside was a smaller ledger, bound in red leather instead of black, and a letter addressed in careful handwriting, "To whoever finds this." Clara opened the letter with shaking hands. The writing was feminine, educated. It began, "My name is Sarah Brennan. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Constance Hale has threatened my life, and I don't think I'll make it out of Montana alive. But I wanted someone to know the truth. I wanted my death to mean something." The letter went on to detail everything Sarah had discovered, everything she'd tried to do. She'd been an investigator, working undercover, sent by a railroad reform commission to look into corruption in Montana Territory. She'd answered Ethan's advertisement as a cover, thinking it would give her access to the Hale family. She'd found more than she'd bargained for. The red ledger contained Sarah's notes, dates, observations, conclusions. It was everything the black ledgers documented, but with Sarah's moral outrage evident on every page. She'd been building a case, planning to expose the Hales and the corrupt railroad executives they worked with. She'd waited too long. At the bottom of the box was a small ring, Sarah's wedding ring, the one she'd been wearing when she died. Clara held it in her palm, feeling the weight of it. This girl, this brave, doomed girl, had tried to do exactly what Clara was doing, had fought the same fight, asked the same questions. But Sarah had fought alone. Clara looked at Ethan, at Lily, at the empty house that had consumed so many lives. "We're going to find her body," she said. "We're going to give her a proper burial, with a headstone that tells the truth about who she was and what she tried to do." "How?" Ethan asked. "If my mother had her killed, Pike probably buried her somewhere remote. Then we'll make Pike tell us where. The marshal can offer him a deal, cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Sarah deserves to be found. Her family deserves to know what happened to her." Lily was crying silently. Clara pulled her close, and they stood there in the office that had held so many terrible secrets, holding each other while the sun set outside and the house settled into darkness. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The investigations, the trials, the long process of dismantling a corrupt empire and trying to make restitution to the families it had destroyed. Tomorrow, Clara would have to face questions and scrutiny and probably threats from people who wanted to keep the truth buried. But tonight, in this moment, Clara allowed herself to feel something like victory. Not complete, not perfect. Victory never was, but real nonetheless. She'd come to Montana expecting hardship and found horror instead. But she'd also found purpose and allies and the strength to stand up to people who thought they were untouchable. She'd married a man she barely knew and become part of a family she was determined to destroy. And somehow, impossibly, she'd survived. The question was, what came next? Clara looked at the ring in her hand, Sarah's ring, a dead girl's legacy, and made a silent promise. She would see this through. She would make sure every crime was exposed, every victim remembered, every guilty person held accountable. It would take months, probably years. The people implicated in the Hale family's crimes wouldn't go down without a fight. There would be legal battles, intimidation attempts, maybe even violence. But Clara had survived this long by being stubborn and refusing to quit even when quitting made sense. She wasn't about to start now. The telegram arrived 3 days after Constance's arrest, delivered by a nervous courier who wouldn't meet Clara's eyes. She signed for it at the door, her hand still bandaged from where she'd cut it, helping Lily pack up the locked office. The marshal had taken the ledgers, but there were thousands of supporting documents, contracts, letters, receipts that needed cataloging. Clara opened the telegram standing in the entrance hall, alone except for the portrait of Old Man Hale glaring down at her with those dead eyes. Stop. Northern Pacific Railroad demands immediate cessation of investigation. Stop. Claims insufficient evidence. Stop. Federal prosecutor receiving pressure from Washington. Stop, Davis. Clara read it twice, her stomach sinking. It had been 3 days. 3 days, and already the people her father-in-law had worked with were circling, trying to kill the investigation before it could expose them. Bad news? Ethan appeared from the dining room, looking like he hadn't slept. He probably hadn't. None of them had. Clara handed him the telegram. His face went gray as he read. "They're going to bury it," he said. "All of it. The railroad has too much power, too many connections. They'll claim the ledgers are forgeries, that Mother acted alone, that Father's crimes were exaggerated. Not if we don't let them. Clara took the telegram back, crushing it in her fist. We have documentation. We have witnesses. We have 43 families who can testify to what was done to them. Testimony from poor farmers against railroad executives? Clara, you know how this works. Money wins. It always wins. Not always. But even as she said it, Clara felt doubt creeping in. She'd been so focused on exposing the Hales, she hadn't fully considered the larger web of corruption they were part of. The railroad executives who'd paid for stolen land, the bankers who'd called in loans on command, the judges who'd looked the other way. All of them had as much to lose as Constance did. All of them would fight to keep the truth buried. Lily came downstairs carrying another box of papers. The marshal's men are here again. They want to go through Father's study. Let them. Clara moved toward the stairs, then stopped. Actually, I'll go with them. Make sure they don't miss anything. She spent the next 4 hours watching deputies sort through decades of paperwork. They were methodical, professional, but Clara could see the overwhelm in their eyes. There was too much. Too many crimes, too many victims, too many threads to follow. One of the deputies, a young man named Peters, shook his head as he opened yet another file. I don't understand how they got away with this for so long. How did no one notice? How did no one stop them? People noticed, Clara said quietly. They just didn't have the power to stop it, or they were too scared to try. Or they were paid to ignore it, Peters said bitterly. My uncle was a territorial judge for 15 years. Took early retirement last year, bought himself a nice house in Denver. I always wondered where he got the money. He held up a ledger entry. Now I know. The Hales paid him $12,000 over 8 years to dismiss cases against them. Clara looked at the entry. Judge Howard Peters. Payments listed by date, each one corresponding to a case that had been thrown out of court. Is that your uncle's name? Yeah. Peters' hands were shaking. He told us he'd made good investments. Told us he was just smart with money, but he was taking bribes. He was helping them destroy people. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just help me nail every single one of them. Everyone who knew, everyone who helped, everyone who profited from this. Peters looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. Can I ask you something, Mrs. Hale? Why'd you do it? You could have just married into this family, lived comfortable, kept quiet. Why risk everything? Clara thought about that. Because someone had to. Because Sarah Brennan died trying, and her death should mean something. Because all those families your uncle betrayed deserve justice, even if it comes 30 years late. Peters nodded slowly. Well, for what it's worth, you're braver than most people I know. Or stupider. The line's pretty thin sometimes. That night, Clara couldn't sleep again. She got up and went to the window, looking out at the estate bathed in moonlight. Beautiful and terrible, like everything else in Montana. She wondered how many ghosts walked these grounds. Thomas Morrison, drinking himself to death. Sarah Brennan, dying alone in the wilderness. All the unnamed people who'd been crushed to build this empire. A soft knock at her door made her turn. It's me, Ethan's voice came from the hallway. Clara opened the door. He stood there in his nightclothes, looking uncertain. Can we talk? Of course. He came in but didn't sit, just stood by the window where Clara had been standing. I've been thinking about what you said, about the railroad trying to bury the investigation. You're right that we can't let them, but we need leverage, something they can't dismiss or explain away. The ledgers are being called forgeries. Bennett's lawyer is claiming Father kept fake records to make himself seem more important than he was. The railroad is saying they had no knowledge of any illegal activity, that they dealt with Father in good faith. Ethan's jaw clenched. They're preparing to throw Mother under the carriage and claim she acted without their knowledge or approval. Can they do that? They're doing it right now. Bennett's agreed to testify that Mother orchestrated everything, that Father was just following her orders. In exchange, he gets a reduced sentence. The railroad gets to claim they were victims of a con artist. And everyone goes home except Mother. Clara felt sick. So Constance takes the fall for everyone. She murdered Sarah. She tried to murder you. She deserves to hang. Ethan's voice was hard. But she shouldn't hang alone. Everyone who helped her, everyone who profited, they should burn too. Then we need something they can't spin, something undeniable. I think I know what that is. Ethan turned from the window. Pike. The man Mother hired to kill Sarah. If we can find him, get him to testify about who hired him and why. He'll never talk. Men like that don't confess. They do if the alternative is worse. Ethan's smile was grim. Pike took money from the railroad too, not just for killing Sarah, but for other jobs. He was their fixer, their problem solver. If we can prove that, if we can show the railroad directly employed a murderer, they can't claim ignorance. How do we find him? Mother kept records of payments to him. They're coded, but I know how to read them. I helped Father with the books when I was younger, before I understood what I was really documenting. Ethan's voice carried disgust. I know where Pike was living as of 6 months ago. We could track him down. The marshal should do that. The marshal is getting pressure from Washington to close the case. He's a good man, but he has bosses, and those bosses have bosses. If we want Pike found and questioned, we need to do it ourselves. Clara studied Ethan's face. He looked different than he had when she'd first arrived. Harder, older, less like a guilt-ridden heir and more like someone who'd finally accepted what he had to do. You want to go after him, yourself? I want to finish this, properly. No more half measures, no more letting other people fight our battles. Ethan met her eyes. I'm not asking you to come with me. This is dangerous, and you've already risked enough. But I'm going whether you approve or not. Where is he? Last address I have is in Butte, mining town, rough place. Pike was working as a security consultant for one of the copper companies, probably doing the same kind of work he did for Father. Intimidation, violence, making problems disappear. When do we leave? Ethan blinked. I just said you don't have to. I know what you said. I'm asking when we leave. Clara, this isn't your fight anymore. You've already exposed the crimes, helped start the investigation. You could walk away now, start over somewhere else. This is absolutely my fight. Sarah died trying to expose your family. I'm not stopping until everyone responsible faces justice, including Pike. Clara crossed her arms. Besides, you'll need backup, someone to watch your back while you're confronting a professional killer. You're not trained for this kind of, I survived your mother trying to shoot me. I think I can handle one hired thug. Clara's voice softened slightly. Ethan, we're in this together. For better or worse, remember? Those vows we took might have been part of a scheme, but I meant them. Partners until this is finished. He looked at her for a long moment, something like gratitude in his eyes. We leave tomorrow at dawn. Tell Lily to stay here, cooperate with the marshal. We'll be back in 3 days with Pike or proof he's dead. And if the railroad sends people after us, then we'd better be faster and smarter than they are. They left before sunrise, taking 2 horses and supplies for a week. Clara had never ridden much, but she learned fast, driven by necessity and stubbornness. The ride to Butte took a day and a half through country that was beautiful and brutal in equal measure. They didn't talk much. Ethan was lost in his thoughts, probably wrestling with the fact that he was hunting down a man his own mother had employed. Clara spent the time thinking about what they'd do when they found Pike, assuming they found him at all. Butte was everything Ethan had promised, rough, dirty, desperate. The mining operations ran day and night, filling the air with smoke and noise. Men moved through the streets with the kind of hard faces that came from doing hard work in hard conditions. Prostitutes called from doorways. Drunks fought in alleys. It was, Clara thought, not unlike the worst parts of Boston. Same desperation, different scenery. They found a boarding house that didn't ask questions and paid for a week in advance. Then they started looking for Pike. The first 2 days were frustrating. No one admitted to knowing anyone by that name. The mining company Pike supposedly worked for claimed they had no record of him. Every lead turned into a dead end. On the 3rd day, Clara tried a different approach. She went to the worst saloon in town, the kind of place where men went to forget or to find trouble. She ordered whiskey she didn't drink and listened to conversations around her. It took an hour, but finally she heard it. 2 men arguing in the corner, one of them saying, "You want someone to handle it? You talk to Pike. He's expensive, but he gets results." Clara waited until the men separated, then followed the one who'd mentioned Pike's name. He led her through a maze of alleys to a building that might have once been a warehouse but was now clearly something else. Armed men stood outside. Women's laughter came from inside, along with cigar smoke and the clink of poker chips. A gambling house. Maybe a brothel. Definitely somewhere illegal. Clara waited until the man went inside, then returned to the boarding house where Ethan was going through newspapers, looking for any mention of the Hale investigation. "I found him," she said. "Or at least I found where he might be." They went back that night, both of them armed. Clara carried a small revolver she'd bought from a pawn shop. Ethan had his father's old service pistol. Neither of them was trained to use the weapons, but the weight of them was reassuring anyway. The gambling house was busier at night. Men came and went, most of them looking like they had money to lose and poor judgment to lose it with. The guards at the door looked Clara and Ethan over with suspicion. "Private club," one of them said. "We're looking for a friend," Ethan said. "Man named Pike. We heard he spends time here." The guard's expression didn't change. "Never heard of him." Clara stepped forward. "Tell him someone wants to discuss a mutual acquaintance. Constance Hale." That got a reaction. The guard's eyes widened slightly. "Wait here." He disappeared inside. 5 minutes later, he returned. "Upstairs, third door on the left. Leave your weapons with me." "No, Sab," Clara said. "Then you don't go up." Clara and Ethan exchanged glances. They were already committed. Turning back now would accomplish nothing. They handed over their guns and went inside. The gambling house smelled like smoke and sweat and desperation. Men hunched over card tables, their faces tight with concentration or loose with drink. Women moved between them, serving drinks, offering companionship. No one looked up as Clara and Ethan climbed the stairs. Third door on the left was unmarked. Ethan knocked. "Come in." The voice was rough, damaged by years of cigars or screaming or both. Clara pushed the door open. The man inside was perhaps 50, built like someone who'd done hard physical labor his whole life. Scars marked his hands and face. His eyes were the coldest Clara had ever seen, flat, empty, like a shark's. "You wanted to talk about Constance Hale," Pike said. "So talk." Clara sat down uninvited. Ethan remained standing, his hand hovering near where his gun would have been if he'd been allowed to keep it. "She's been arrested," Clara said, "for murder, fraud, theft. She's going to hang." Pike's expression didn't change. "That's unfortunate for her. She's going to name everyone who helped her, everyone who carried out her orders, everyone who took her money." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. She's already given the marshal a list of names. Yours is on it." Pike smiled, and it was the most unnerving thing Clara had seen. No warmth, no humor, just teeth. "Mrs. Hale is a desperate woman trying to spread blame. My name being on a list doesn't prove anything." "What about Sarah Brennan?" Clara asked. "Does that name mean anything to you?" For the first time, something flickered in Pike's eyes. "Should it?" "You killed her 3 years ago. Constance Hale paid you to do it. Sarah was an investigator looking into railroad corruption, and when she got too close to the truth, Constance ordered her eliminated. You followed her out of town, caught up with her near Devil's Canyon, and murdered her. Then you buried her body somewhere remote." Pike leaned back in his chair. "That's quite a story. You have any proof?" "We have Constance's testimony. We have payment records showing she gave you $5,000 the day after Sarah disappeared. We have witnesses who saw you leaving town the same night Sarah did." Clara was bluffing on the witnesses, but Pike didn't need to know that. "And we have Sarah's journal, where she wrote about being followed by a man matching your description." That last part was true. Sarah's red ledger had included descriptions of the intimidation she'd faced, including a tall, scarred man who'd shown up at the Hale estate several times in the weeks before her death. Pike studied Clara's face, probably trying to determine how much she actually knew versus how much she was guessing. "Even if any of that were true, why would I talk to you? You're not law enforcement." "No, but I can offer you something the marshal can't," Clara said. "A deal. Tell us who else hired you. Give us names of railroad executives, bank presidents, anyone who paid you to do their dirty work. Testify against them in court. In exchange, we make sure the prosecutors know you cooperated. Maybe you get prison instead of a noose." Or maybe I tell you to go to hell and keep my mouth shut. They can't convict me without a body, and they'll never find Sarah Brennan. I made sure of that. Claire's hands clenched under the table, but she kept her voice steady. They'll convict you on Constance's testimony alone. And once you're hanged, the railroad executives you protected will sleep easy, knowing their secrets died with you. Is that really how you want this to end? Taking the fall for rich men who'll forget your name before your body's cold? Pike was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. You don't understand how this works. The people you're talking about, they're not just rich. They're powerful. Connected all the way to Washington. They'll kill you before they let you expose them. They've already started, haven't they? Pressure on the investigation, newspapers backing off the story, federal prosecutors getting cold feet. That's why we need your testimony, to prove direct connection between the railroad and criminal activity. My testimony gets me killed. In prison, in a courtroom, doesn't matter where. They'll reach me. Ethan spoke for the first time. Then take their money and run. We know you've been paid well over the years. You could disappear, start over somewhere they'd never find you. Pike turned from the window. Is that what you're offering? Money to disappear? I'm offering you a choice, Ethan said. Face justice and cooperate, or take enough money to vanish and never come back. Either way, you're done working for people like my mother. How much money? $10,000, cash. Enough to get to Mexico or South America and live comfortably for years. It was a fortune. More than most people earned in a lifetime. Clara wanted to object. This man had murdered Sarah, had probably murdered others, and now they were offering to let him escape justice? But she understood Ethan's logic. If Pike wouldn't testify, they needed him gone. Out of reach of the railroad, unable to deny or corroborate their case. Pike considered the offer. I take your money, I disappear. What's to stop me from coming back in 5 years and causing problems for you? Nothing, Clara said. Except if you do, we'll have the full weight of the federal government coming after you. Right now, you're a name on a list, a suspected killer with no body and shaky evidence. But if you take our money and break the deal, we'll make sure every lawman from here to the border knows exactly who you are and what you've done. You'll never have another peaceful day. Pike smiled that terrible smile again. You've got steel in you, girl. I'll give you that. He walked to a desk in the corner, opened a drawer, and pulled out a leather-bound book. Before I take your money, you should know what you're buying. He tossed the book on the table between them. Clara opened it. It was a ledger, similar to the ones Pike's employers had kept. But this one documented his jobs, names, dates, methods. Sarah Brennan's death was there, along with 17 others. Some Clara recognized from Old Man Hale's ledgers. Others were new, people who'd crossed the railroad or the banks or other powerful interests Pike had worked for. That's my insurance, Pike said, in case my employers ever decided I knew too much. I kept records of everything, every one. You want to expose the railroad? That book will do it. It's got names of executives who ordered kills, dates of payments, descriptions of how each job was carried out. Everything you need to bring them down. Clara's hand shook as she turned the pages. This was it. This was the evidence that could crack the whole corrupt system wide open. Not just the Hales, but everyone who'd used violence and murder to build their fortunes. Why would you give this to us? She asked. Because I'm tired, Pike said simply. Tired of killing, tired of watching my back, tired of working for men who think I'm disposable. You want to burn it all down? Go ahead, just let me get far enough away that the flames don't reach me. Ethan pulled out a bank draft. 10,000. It'll take 3 days to clear, but I can give you 2,000 in cash now, and you can pick up the rest at the bank in Billings once the draft processes. Pike took the cash and the draft, counted them carefully, then nodded. Deal. I'm leaving tonight. You'll never see me again. Where's Sarah Brennan's body? Clara asked quietly. Pike looked at her, something almost like regret crossing his face. Devil's Canyon, like the rumors said. There's a cave about half a mile down the North Ridge. I put her there, covered the entrance with rocks. Figured the animals would take care of the rest, but the cave probably kept her preserved. You want to bury her proper, that's where you'll find her. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me. I killed her. Doesn't matter that I was paid to do it. I still did it. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of. Pike picked up his ledger. But maybe this helps balance the scales a little. Maybe it doesn't. Either way, I'm done. He left through a back door, taking his ledger and their money with him. Clara and Ethan sat in the empty room, both of them trying to process what had just happened. "We let a murderer go free," Clara said. "We bought evidence that could expose an entire corrupt network," Ethan countered. "Pike would never have testified. He'd have been killed before trial, or he'd have disappeared on his own. This way, we get what we need, and he gets gone." "It doesn't feel right. It's not right. None of this is right, but it's the best we could manage." Ethan stood. "Let's get his ledger to Marshal Davis before the railroad figures out what we've done." They left Butte that night, riding hard, carrying Pike's ledger wrapped in oilcloth like it was made of glass. Clara kept checking behind them, certain they'd be followed, but the road stayed empty. They reached Helena 2 days later, exhausted and filthy. Marshal Davis met them in his office, his face grim. "I've been ordered to close the investigation," he said without preamble. "Territorial governor says there's insufficient evidence to proceed. The railroad's lawyers are threatening lawsuits. Federal prosecutors are backing away. What if we give you something that changes everything?" Clara set Pike's ledger on his desk. Complete documentation of 17 murders carried out on behalf of railroad executives, bank presidents, and territorial officials. Names, dates, payments, methods, everything. Davis opened the ledger. His face went pale as he read. "Where did you get this?" "Pike. In exchange for money to disappear. You paid off a murderer?" "We bought evidence you couldn't get any other way," Ethan said. "Pike's gone. You'll never catch him, but his ledger stays and it proves direct connection between the railroad and criminal activity. They can't claim ignorance now." Davis kept reading, his jaw getting tighter with each page. Finally, he looked up. "This implicates Senator Harrison and Judge Mitchell and William Crawford from Northern Pacific's executive board." "I know," Clara said. "So the question is, are you going to let them bury it, or are you going to use it?" Davis closed the ledger carefully. "If I pursue this, they'll come after me. My career, my family, everything. They'll destroy me the same way the Hales destroyed everyone who crossed them." "Probably," Clara agreed. "Or you become the man who exposed the biggest corruption scandal in territorial history, the man who proved that rich men aren't above the law. Either way, you'll never be able to look at yourself in the mirror if you bury this." Davis laughed bitterly. "You don't pull punches, do you, Mrs. Hale?" "I can't afford to. Too many people have died already." The marshal stood and walked to his window, looking out at Helena's streets. "My father was a sheriff in Kansas, got shot trying to arrest a rich man's son for murder. The boy's father paid everyone off, and my father's death got ruled a suicide. I became a lawman to make sure that didn't happen to anyone else." He turned back to them. "All right. I'll use Pike's ledger. I'll present it to a federal grand jury, push for indictments. But you two need to be ready for what comes next. The people named in that book won't go quietly." "We're ready," Clara said, hoping it was true. They returned to Blackwood Estate 3 days later to find chaos. Federal agents had seized the property. Every room was being searched, every document cataloged. Lily met them at the door, her face pale. "They came yesterday," she said the estate is evidence in a criminal conspiracy. They're taking everything, the furniture, the artwork, the horses. They've frozen all the accounts. We have nothing, Clara, nothing." Clara looked at the house she had only lived in for 2 weeks, the mansion built on blood and lies. She felt nothing. No attachment, no regret. It had never been hers anyway. "Good," she said. "Let them take it. Let them auction it off and use the money to compensate the families your father destroyed. This place should never have existed." "But where will we go? What will we do?" Clara looked at Ethan, who was staring at his childhood home like he was saying goodbye to something he'd loved and hated in equal measure. "We start over," Clara said, "all of us. Somewhere new, with nothing except what we can earn honestly. We build lives that aren't based on theft and murder. We become people we can actually be proud of." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I," Clara admitted, "but we'll figure it out together." That night, they packed what little the federal agents allowed them to keep, a few clothes, some personal items, nothing of significant value. Everything else belonged to the investigation now, evidence of crimes that would finally see justice. Clara found Mrs. Baker in the kitchen, preparing what would probably be her last meal in this house. "Will you be all right?" Clara asked. The housekeeper nodded. "I've got family in Oregon. I'll go stay with them for a while. Find new work eventually. I'm just glad it's over. Glad I don't have to keep pretending I don't see what's right in front of me." "Mrs. Baker, Sarah Brennan, did you know her well?" The older woman's hand stilled. "Well enough. She was kind to me. Asked how I was doing, remembered my name. The family had never done that before." Her voice thickened. "I knew something had happened to her, knew it wasn't right, the way they said she'd just run off. But I was too scared to say anything, too scared of ending up like her. It's not your fault, isn't it? I stayed silent, I kept their secrets. That makes me complicit, doesn't it?" Clara didn't have an answer to that. Maybe it did. Maybe everyone who'd known what the Hales were and stayed quiet bore some responsibility. But she also understood fear, understood survival, understood that not everyone had the luxury of being brave. "We found her," Clara said quietly. "Pike told us where her body is. The marshal is sending a team to recover her remains. She'll get a proper burial, and her family will finally know what happened to her." Mrs. Baker turned away, wiping her eyes. "That's something, at least. That's more than I thought she'd ever get." Clara left her to her grief and went to find Ethan. He was in his father's study, the real one, not the locked office, staring at the empty shelves where the ledgers had been. "They're all going to prison," he said without turning around. "Mother, Bennett, the railroad executives Pike named, the judges and sheriffs who took bribes. All of them. The trials will take years, but they'll all go down." "That's what we wanted, isn't it? Justice? Is it justice, or is it just revenge with legal paperwork?" Ethan finally looked at her. "I keep thinking about all the people my family hurt. 43 families destroyed, 17 people murdered, dozens more intimidated or driven away. How do you make up for that? How do you balance those scales?" "You don't," Clara said. "You can't. The damage is done. But you can make sure it stops. Make sure no one else gets hurt the same way. Make sure the people responsible face consequences. And then what? After the trials, after the convictions, after everything's said and done? What then?" Clara moved to stand beside him, looking at the same empty room he was looking at. "Then we live. We build something better. We become proof that people can change, that families aren't defined forever by their worst members. We honor the dead by living honestly. You make it sound simple. It's not. It'll be the hardest thing we ever do." Clara took his hand. "But I think we can do it. I think we have to try." Ethan squeezed her hand. "I'm glad you answered that advertisement. Glad you came here, even though I lied to you. Glad you were stubborn enough to fight instead of run." "So am I, most days anyway." Clara smiled slightly. "Ask me again when we're eating beans in some one-room apartment, working honest jobs for low wages, trying to figure out how to survive without a fortune built on blood." "Still glad?" "Yeah," Clara said, surprised to find she meant it. "Still glad." They stood there in the empty study, two people bound by marriage and circumstance and the shared weight of terrible knowledge. Outside, federal agents continued their work, dismantling an empire piece by piece. Somewhere in Montana, Sarah Brennan's body waited to be found and laid to rest. Somewhere in Helena, Marshal Davis was preparing indictments that would shake the territory to its foundations. And Clara felt, for the first time since she'd stepped off that train 2 weeks ago, something like peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just peace. The knowledge that she'd done what needed doing, that she'd stood up when it mattered, that she'd refused to let evil hide behind money and power and carefully maintained lies. She'd come to Montana expecting hardship. She'd found horror instead. But she'd also found purpose and strength and allies worth fighting for. Tomorrow, they'd leave Blackwood Estate for the last time. Tomorrow, they'd start building new lives with nothing except determination and each other. But tonight, in this house that had consumed so many, Clara allowed herself to feel something the Hale family had probably never felt. The quiet dignity of knowing she'd chosen the right path, even when the easier path had been right there waiting. She'd survived. And more than that, she'd made survival mean something. The morning they left Blackwood Estate, it was snowing. Big, wet flakes that turned the mansion's dark stone white, made it look almost innocent, almost beautiful. Clara stood in front of it one last time, a carpet bag containing everything she owned in one hand, Ethan beside her, Lily shivering in a coat too thin for the weather. A federal agent locked the front door and posted a notice declaring the property seized pending criminal proceedings. Clara watched him work and felt nothing. This place had never been home. Just a tomb where she'd almost gotten buried alongside all the other inconvenient people who'd asked too many questions. "Ready?" Ethan asked. "More than ready." They walked to the train depot, their breath making clouds in the cold air. The carriage was gone, sold at auction along with the horses and everything else of value. The 6-mile walk took 2 hours, and by the time they reached Silver Ridge, Clara's feet were numb and her face was raw from wind. The depot was crowded with people waiting for the morning train to Helena. Clara recognized some of them. Businessmen who'd attended the wedding, shop owners who'd smiled nervously at the Hales while taking their money. Now they looked away when Clara met their eyes, uncomfortable with the reminder of how complicit they'd been. Jack Morrison was there, though. He approached Clara with his hat in his hands, his weathered face uncertain. "Mrs. Hale, heard you were leaving." News travels fast. In a town this size, always does. Morrison shifted his weight. "I wanted to thank you for what you did, for my father, for all the families that got destroyed. We're finally getting some of our land back. The federal court ordered restitution from the seized estate assets." "That's good. I'm glad. It won't bring my father back. Won't undo 30 years of suffering, but it's something." Morrison extended his hand. "You're braver than most people I know. Braver than me, certainly. I talked big, came to that house with rifles and anger, but you're the one who actually fought. You're the one who won." Clara shook his hand. "I didn't win anything, Mr. Morrison. I just refused to lose quietly. There's a difference." "Maybe, but the result's the same." He tipped his hat to Ethan and Lily. "You take care of her. She's worth 10 of the rest of us." The train arrived in a cloud of steam and smoke. They found seats in a third-class car, squeezed between a family with crying children and a miner who smelled like he hadn't bathed in weeks. A far cry from the private carriage that had brought Clara to Montana, but she preferred it this way. Honest discomfort instead of luxury built on blood. Helena was 3 hours north. Clara spent the journey watching Montana pass by the window, vast, empty, beautiful in a way that made her chest hurt. She'd only been here 2 weeks, but it felt like years. She'd arrived as one person and was leaving as someone else entirely. "What will you do?" Lily asked quietly. "In Helena, I mean. Do you have plans?" "Find work," Clara said. Find a place to live. Figure out how to survive." "That's not much of a plan. It's all I've ever had. Plans are for people with options. I've always just had survival." "But you're different now. You're married to Ethan. You exposed a major corruption scandal. You're going to be famous." "I'm going to be infamous," Clara corrected. "The woman who destroyed a prominent family. The social climber who turned on her benefactors. That's how the newspapers will tell it, once the railroad gets their version of events out there." Lily looked stricken. "They wouldn't. You're a hero." "I'm an inconvenient witness who embarrassed powerful people. Trust me, heroes get rewritten as villains all the time." Clara managed to smile. "But I don't care what they write about me. I know what I did and why I did it. That's enough." Ethan had been quiet the whole journey, staring out the opposite window. Now he spoke without turning around. "The trial starts in 3 weeks, for Mother and Bennett. The railroad executives' trials won't start for months. They've got better lawyers, more money to delay. But Mother and Bennett go first." "Will you testify?" Clara asked. "I have to. The prosecutor subpoenaed me." Ethan's voice was hollow. "I have to stand up in court and detail everything my father did, everything Mother helped him do. I have to explain the ledgers, the payments, the systematic destruction of families, and Mother will be sitting right there watching me destroy her. She destroyed herself." "I know. Doesn't make it easier." Ethan finally looked at her. "What if I can't do it? What if I get up there and freeze, or worse? What if some part of me still wants to protect her? She's my mother, Clara. Even after everything, even knowing what she is." "You'll do it," Clara said firmly, "because you're not your father and you're not your mother. You're someone who chose to face the truth even when it would have been easier to stay blind. You're someone who helped expose the crimes instead of covering them up. That's who you are now. You sound very certain. I am. You've already made the hard choice. Standing up in court is just following through. The train pulled into Helena in early afternoon. The city was larger than Silver Ridge, more sophisticated, but Clara could see the same dynamics at play. Rich neighborhoods on the hills, poor ones in the valleys, fine houses next to shacks, the veneer of civilization barely covering the raw scramble for money and power. They found a boarding house that would take all three of them for $2 a week. The rooms were small, the furniture broken down, the walls so thin Clara could hear every conversation in the building. After Blackwood Estate's silk and marble, it should have felt like a punishment. Instead, it felt like freedom. That evening, Clara went to see Marshall Davis at his office. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. His face was drawn, his eyes bloodshot, and his desk was buried under paperwork. "Mrs. Hale," he said, standing when she entered, "I was going to send for you. We found Sarah Brennan's body where Pike said it would be. Devil's Canyon, in a cave. She'd been there 3 years, but the cold and the dry air preserved her enough for identification." Clara's throat tightened. "Was it quick? The way she died?" Davis hesitated. "She was shot once in the back, probably didn't know it was coming, for what that's worth." "It's worth something." Clara sat down without being invited. "What happens now?" "We're releasing her remains to her family. They're coming from Illinois to claim her. The territorial government is paying for the funeral, and there's going to be a memorial service. The governor wants to make a statement about justice being served, how Montana won't tolerate corruption." Davis's smile was bitter. "Convenient how eager politicians are to denounce crimes once there's no risk in doing it." "Will you speak? At the memorial?" "I've been asked to. I'm not sure what I'd say. Sorry we let a brave investigator get murdered while she was trying to do the right thing. Sorry it took 3 years and another near murder before anyone cared enough to investigate. You could say she didn't die in vain, that her death led to exposing the people who killed her." Clara met his eyes. "You could say that because of her, 43 families are getting some justice. That because of her, the corrupt system that protected her killers is being torn apart. That her courage inspired others to come forward." Davis studied her face. "You should speak at the memorial, not me. You're the one who actually did something. I'm the one everyone's going to blame when the trials start and their beloved business leaders end up in prison. I'm not the right messenger. You're the only honest messenger we have." Clara thought about that. She'd never wanted to be a public figure, never wanted attention or recognition. She just wanted to survive, and then she'd wanted justice for Sarah. But maybe telling Sarah's story publicly was part of that justice. Maybe making sure people understood what she'd died trying to expose was how her death could mean something. "All right," Clara said. "I'll speak, but only if you promise me something." "What?" "That you won't let them bury this. The railroad is already working to minimize the damage, to claim the corruption was limited to a few individuals. You've got Pike's ledger. You know it goes deeper. Promise me you'll follow every thread, no matter where it leads or who it implicates." Davis was quiet for a long moment. That kind of investigation could take years. Could destroy my career if I target the wrong people. Or it could make your career if you actually see it through. Either way, you gave me your word you'd use Pike's ledger. I'm holding you to it. You're relentless, you know that? I've been told. Clara stood. When's the memorial service? 5 days from now, 2 o'clock at the First Presbyterian Church. Sarah's family wants to meet you if you're willing. Clara's stomach clenched. She'd thought about Sarah's family often, wondered what they'd been told, how they'd coped with not knowing what happened to their daughter. The idea of facing them, of seeing their grief up close, was almost overwhelming, but she owed them the truth. I'll be there. The next 5 days passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Clara found work doing laundry for a hotel, hard, mind-numbing labor that paid barely enough to contribute to their boarding house rent. Ethan found work as a clerk in a law office, his education and neat handwriting making him useful despite his family name. Lily enrolled in a local school, the first time she'd been around people her own age in years. They were poor now, genuinely poor, in a way the Hales had never been even when they were pretending to be. They ate cheap food, wore worn clothes, lived in cramped quarters where privacy was a luxury they couldn't afford. It was hard and uncomfortable and sometimes humiliating, but it was also clean, honest. Every dollar they earned came from work they could be proud of. Every night, Clara slept without nightmares about ledgers full of murder. The day of Sarah's memorial service, Clara wore the only decent dress she owned. The same green wool she'd arrived in, mended so many times it was more thread than fabric. She walked to the church alone, leaving Ethan and Lily at the boarding house. This felt like something she needed to do by herself. The church was packed. Clara recognized some faces from the investigation. Marshal Davis, several deputies, a federal prosecutor who'd come from Washington to handle the railroad cases. But most of the attendees were strangers, people who'd known Sarah or heard about her story and wanted to pay respects. A middle-aged couple sat in the front pew, the woman's face swollen from crying. Sarah's parents. Clara felt like an intruder, like she had no right to be here. But Davis saw her and waved her over. "Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, this is Clara Hale. She's the one I told you about." Sarah's mother stood and took Clara's hands. Her grip was tight, almost painful. "You found her. You found our girl." "I'm so sorry for your loss," Clara said, the words feeling inadequate. Sarah was incredibly brave. She was trying to expose terrible crimes, and she almost succeeded. If she'd had more time, more support— "She had neither," Sarah's father said, his voice rough with grief and anger. "We sent her to Montana thinking she'd be safe, that the territorial authorities would protect her. Instead, she was murdered, and they covered it up." "I know. I'm sorry." "Marshal Davis told us you were almost killed too," Mrs. Brennan said, "that you exposed the people who murdered Sarah, helped bring them to justice. He said without you, we'd never have known what happened to her." Clara felt tears burning her eyes. She deserved better. She deserved to live, to see the people she was investigating face consequences. She deserved to go home to you. Mrs. Brennan pulled Clara into a fierce hug. "Thank you for not giving up, for fighting when it would have been easier to run. Thank you for making sure Sarah's death meant something." The service began. The minister spoke about Sarah's dedication to justice, her courage, her faith that good would ultimately triumph over evil. Other speakers told stories about Sarah as a daughter, a friend, a committed investigator who believed in making the world better. Then it was Clara's turn. She walked to the front of the church, her hands shaking, her throat tight. She'd never spoken in front of a crowd before, never imagined she'd be eulogizing someone she'd never met, but felt connected to in the deepest way. "I didn't know Sarah Brennan," Clara began, her voice barely steady. "I came to Montana 2 weeks ago, a desperate woman answering a marriage advertisement, expecting hardship and hoping for survival. What I found instead was a mystery, a woman who'd come before me, who'd asked too many questions and paid for it with her life." She told them about finding clues Sarah had left behind, about discovering the ledgers and understanding what Sarah had died trying to expose, about deciding to finish what Sarah had started, even knowing the risks. "Sarah could have run," Clara said. "When she realized the Hales were dangerous, when she knew her life was in danger, she could have left Montana and saved herself. But she stayed because she believed the truth mattered more than her safety. She believed the families who'd been destroyed deserved justice. She believed that powerful people shouldn't be able to commit crimes without consequences." Clara's voice grew stronger. "She was right, about all of it. And because she gathered evidence, because she documented what she found, because she left a trail for others to follow, 43 families are getting some measure of justice. The people who murdered her are going to prison. The corrupt system that protected them is being torn apart." She looked at Sarah's parents. "Your daughter was a hero, not because she died, but because she fought, because she refused to look away from evil, even when it would have been easier, because she believed in something bigger than herself. The world is better because Sarah Brennan lived and fought and cared, and I promise you, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure people remember what she did." When Clara finished, the church was silent, except for the sound of crying. She returned to her seat, her legs barely holding her whole body shaking with emotion. After the service, people approached Clara. Some thanked her. Others wanted to shake her hand to tell her she was brave. A few looked at her with suspicion or hostility, people who'd benefited from the system Sarah and Clara had exposed, who resented the disruption. A well-dressed man in his 50s stopped in front of her. "Mrs. Hale, I'm Thomas Whitmore. I work for the Department of Interior in Washington. Could we speak privately?" Clara followed him outside where snow was falling again, turning Helena white and quiet. "I've been following your case," Whitmore said. "The Hale investigation, Pike's Ledger, the evidence you've helped uncover. It's extraordinary work, the kind of work we need more people doing." "I'm not looking for praise, Mr. Whitmore. I'm not offering it. I'm offering a job." He handed her a card. "The Department of Interior has a new division investigating corruption in territorial governments, specifically related to railroad land grants and homestead fraud. We need investigators who can't be bought, who have experience exposing this kind of corruption. People like you." Clara stared at the card. "You want to hire me? As an investigator?" "Sarah Brennan was one of our best agents. Her death was a devastating loss, but you've proven you have the same qualities she had: intelligence, courage, determination. We could use someone like you." "I have no training, no education beyond basic literacy. I'm a laundry worker who happened to stumble onto a crime." "You're a woman who systematically exposed a 30-year conspiracy, outwitted a family of murderers, and lived to testify about it. That's better training than any academy could provide." Whitmore's expression was serious. "I'm not going to pretend this job is safe. It's dangerous work. The people you'd investigate have money, power, and no moral qualms about silencing threats. But it's important work. Work that could help prevent what happened to Sarah from happening to others." Clara thought about that. Thought about spending the rest of her life doing laundry, surviving but not really living. Thought about Sarah dying alone because no one had backed her up, because she'd fought the fight by herself. "If I took this job," Clara said slowly, "would I have support, resources, or would I be alone like Sarah was?" "You'd have backup, federal marshals, other investigators, access to legal resources. We've learned from Sarah's death. We won't send agents into dangerous situations without protection." "And the pay?" $75 a month plus expenses. Enough to live comfortably, save a little. More than most women earn, certainly more than you're making washing sheets. It was a fortune compared to her current wages. It was also terrifying. But Clara had learned over the past 2 weeks that she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined, that she could face down killers and expose corruption and survive. Maybe she could do it again. Maybe she could become the person Sarah had been, someone who fought for justice even when it was dangerous, who gave voice to people who'd been silenced. "I'll need to discuss it with my husband," Clara said. "Of course, think about it. Talk to your family. The offer stands for the next week. After that, I'll need an answer." That night, Clara told Ethan about the offer. They sat in their cramped room, the walls thin enough that they could hear their neighbors arguing, and discussed whether Clara should become a federal investigator. "It's dangerous," Ethan said. "You almost died twice already. Taking a job that deliberately puts you in harm's way." "I know. But Ethan, what's the alternative? Spend the rest of my life doing laundry, pretending the past 2 weeks didn't happen? I can't go back to just surviving, not after everything I've seen." "You could do other things. Open a business, go to school, anything that doesn't involve hunting down murderers." "I could, but I don't want to." Clara took his hand. "Sarah died doing this work. She died believing it mattered. I want to prove she was right. I want to make sure other families don't get destroyed the way yours destroyed so many. I want to be someone who fights instead of someone who just endures." Ethan was quiet for a long time. "What about us? Our marriage? I know it started as a scheme, but I thought maybe—" "We'll figure it out," Clara said gently. "Maybe we stay married. Maybe we don't. Maybe we become friends instead of spouses. I don't know what our future looks like, Ethan, but I know I need to do this. I need to try." "Then you should take the job." Ethan's smile was sad but genuine. "You're right. You can't go back to just surviving. You're meant for more than that. You always were." 3 days later, Clara met with Whitmore and accepted the position. Her first assignment would begin after the Hale trials concluded. She'd be investigating land fraud in Wyoming territory, working undercover to gather evidence against a powerful cattle rancher suspected of using violence to drive out homesteaders. It sounded terrifying. It sounded exactly like what had almost gotten her killed in Montana. It sounded perfect. The trials began in April, 5 months after Clara had first arrived in Montana. Constance Hale and Marcus Bennett were tried together, facing charges of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, theft, and obstruction of justice. Clara testified for 3 days. She detailed everything: the locked office, the ledgers, the payments to Pike, Constance's confession at the wedding. The defense attorneys tried to discredit her, painting her as a social climber who turned on the family that took her in. But the evidence was overwhelming. The ledgers, Pike's testimony via deposition, the recovered body of Sarah Brennan, it all corroborated Clara's account. Ethan testified next. Clara watched from the gallery as he faced his mother across the courtroom and told the truth about his father's crimes, his mother's complicity, the systematic destruction of families. Constance sat perfectly still, her face a mask, but her eyes never left her son. When Ethan finished, Constance stood. "May I address the court?" The judge looked surprised but nodded. "You may." Constance turned to face the gallery, her posture perfect, her voice steady. "I've listened to these proceedings for weeks. I've heard myself called a murderer, a criminal, a monster, and I suppose by the law's standards that's accurate. I did order Sarah Brennan killed. I did help my husband destroy families. I did cover up crimes and intimidate witnesses and bribe officials." A murmur went through the courtroom. Her own lawyer looked horrified. "But I want you to understand something," Constance continued. "I did it all to protect my family, to ensure the Hale name would endure, to give my children a future. Every decision I made, every terrible thing I did, it was for them. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect understanding. But I want you to know that I'm not sorry. Given the same circumstances, I'd make the same choices, because that's what mothers do. We protect our children, no matter the cost." She sat down. The courtroom erupted in noise, people shouting, the judge banging his gavel. Clara felt sick. Constance was trying to reframe herself as a devoted mother instead of a murderer, trying to turn her crimes into some kind of twisted maternal sacrifice. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all charges. Constance Hale was sentenced to hang. Marcus Bennett got life in prison. The railroad executives' trials were still months away, but the precedent was set. Justice was coming, slow and imperfect, but real. The execution was scheduled for June. Clara didn't plan to attend, but Lily asked her to come. "I know she's terrible," Lily said. "I know she deserves this, but she's still my mother. I can't watch her die alone." So Clara went, standing with Lily in the small crowd that gathered to witness justice. Constance walked to the gallows with her head high, refusing a hood, staring at the horizon with those cold eyes until the very end. When it was over, Lily cried. Clara held her while she sobbed, this girl who'd lost her father to cancer and her mother to the consequences of her own evil, orphaned by choices she'd had no part in making. "What do I do now?" Lily asked through her tears. "Where do I go?" "You come with me," Clara said. "I'm going to Wyoming for my first assignment. You can come along, help with the investigation. Or you can stay in Helena, finish school. Either way, you're not alone. You have people who care about you." "I don't deserve people caring about me. I'm a Hale. My family destroyed so many lives. You're not responsible for what your family did. You're only responsible for what you do with your own life." Clara tilted Lily's chin up. "You helped me expose the crimes. You stood up to your mother when it mattered. You're not your family's sins. You're your own person, and you get to decide what that means." Lily wiped her eyes. "Can I really come with you? To Wyoming?" "If you want. It'll be hard work, probably dangerous. But you'd be helping people, making sure other families don't get destroyed the way yours destroyed so many. Seems like a good way to spend a life. Better than any alternative I can think of." They left Montana in July, Clara and Lily traveling by train to Wyoming. Ethan stayed in Helena, working as a legal clerk, testifying in the ongoing railroad trials. They'd agreed to a separation, not quite a divorce, but an acknowledgement that their marriage had been born from deception and circumstance rather than genuine partnership. "Maybe someday," Ethan had said when they parted, "if we both become people worth knowing, maybe then we try again. Maybe, Clara had agreed. Or maybe we just become good friends who happen to be married once. Either way, I'm glad I met you. Even though I lied to you and nearly got you killed? Even though Wyoming was rougher than Montana, which Clara hadn't thought possible. The town she was investigating was barely a town, just a collection of shacks around a cattle operation run by a man named Coulter, who'd been accused of murdering 3 homesteaders who'd claimed land he wanted. Clara posed as a widow looking for work. Lily posed as her niece. They rented a room above the general store and started asking careful questions, gathering evidence, building a case. It took 6 months. 6 months of dangerous work, close calls, nights spent wondering if they'd end up like Sarah Brennan. But they got what they needed. Documentation of Coulter's crimes, witness testimony, enough evidence for federal prosecutors to bring charges. When the marshals arrived to arrest Coulter, he tried to fight. He shot one deputy, wounded another. But they took him alive, and he went to trial, and justice was served. Clara and Lily moved on to their next assignment. Then the next. Then the next. Over the next 3 years, Clara became one of the Department of Interior's most effective investigators. She exposed corruption in 5 territories, helped convict dozens of criminals, saved countless families from the kind of destruction the Hales had inflicted. She wasn't perfect at it. She made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, nearly died more times than she could count. But she learned, got better. Became the kind of investigator Sarah Brennan had been, relentless, clever, willing to risk everything for justice. Lily became her partner, her apprentice, eventually an investigator in her own right. The frightened girl who'd warned Clara to run transformed into a fierce young woman who fought corruption with the same determination that had once driven her to expose her own family. In 1887, 4 years after Clara first arrived in Montana, she returned to Silver Ridge for the dedication of a memorial. The town had erected a monument to Sarah Brennan, a simple stone marker in the town square, engraved with her name and the words, "She fought for justice and paid the ultimate price." Jack Morrison was there, along with his family. They'd gotten their land back, rebuilt what the Hales had destroyed. He approached Clara with a smile. "Mrs. Hale, or should I call you Investigator Whitlock now?" "Just Clara is fine." She looked at the memorial. "This is good. Sarah deserves to be remembered." "So do you. You started all this. If you hadn't come here, hadn't fought, someone else would have, eventually. Justice delayed isn't justice denied, just delayed." "Maybe." Morrison's smile faded. "I heard about Ethan. I'm sorry." Clara had heard too. Ethan had died 6 months earlier, killed in a courthouse bombing targeting judges involved in the railroad trials. The bombers had never been caught, but everyone knew who'd ordered it. The same powerful interests Clara and Sarah had spent years fighting. "He did good work before he died," Clara said quietly. "Helped prosecute dozens of corrupt officials, made sure his father's crimes didn't get buried. He became someone worth respecting. That's more than most people manage." After the dedication, Clara visited Devil's Canyon alone. She stood at the spot where Sarah's body had been found and placed wildflowers on the ground. "I kept my promise," Clara said to the empty air. "I made sure people remember you, made sure your death meant something, and I've kept fighting, still am. Probably will until someone kills me or I get too old to care." The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the scent of sage and snow. "I hope that's enough," Clara continued. "I hope wherever you are, you know that what you started didn't end with you, that other people picked up the fight, that justice is slow and imperfect, but it's coming." She stood there until the sun set, thinking about all the fights still ahead, all the corrupt officials still in power, all the families still being destroyed, all the work left to do. It was overwhelming. Impossible, really. But Clara had learned something in the 4 years since she'd stepped off that train in Silver Ridge. She'd learned that impossible just meant hard, that overwhelming just meant you needed help, that the fights worth fighting were never easy and never finished. She'd come to Montana expecting hardship and found horror, but she'd also found purpose and strength and proof that one person fighting could make a difference. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, fighting, making the world slightly less terrible than she'd found it. And if that wasn't enough to build a life on, Clara didn't know what was. She left Devil's Canyon as the last light faded, heading back toward town and Lily and their next assignment. There was always a next assignment. Always more corrupt officials to expose, more crimes to investigate, more people who needed someone to fight for them. Clara had become that someone, not because she was special or brave or particularly good, but because someone had to be. Because Sarah had died fighting and deserved to have her work continue. Because 43 families had been destroyed and deserved justice. Because the frontier was full of powerful people who thought they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. Clara had spent 4 years proving them wrong. She'd spend the rest of her life doing the same. It wasn't the life she'd expected when she'd answered that advertisement. It wasn't comfortable or safe or easy. But it was hers, built on her own choices, her own work, her own determination to stand up instead of staying down. And that, Clara thought, as she walked through the Montana twilight, was worth more than any empire built on blood could ever be. She'd come to the frontier looking for survival. She'd found something better. She'd found a reason to fight. And she'd never stop fighting until her last breath left her body. That was the promise she'd made to Sarah, to the Morrison family, to all the nameless victims of corruption and greed. That was the promise she intended to keep, no matter what it cost her.